Their marriage was just business. Until the millionaire whispered, "Stay with me tonight." She signed the contract in the same conference room where she once served him coffee, trading a year of her life for freedom from her past. But the millionaire Matthew Kirk's whispered "Stay with me tonight" wasn't in any clause Jasmine Kenneth had negotiated. The city never slept, but Matthew Kirk had stopped trying years ago. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 47th floor, watching headlights bleed into red streaks below. The skyline glittered with 1,000 stories he'd never be part of. Families tucking children into bed, couples sharing wine on cramped balcony fire escapes, people who knew what it felt like to go home to something warm. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jaw tight, designer suit still crisp despite the midnight hour. Behind him, his desk was a study in controlled chaos. Acquisition reports, market analyses, and, mocking him from beneath a crystal paperweight, a single sheet of ivory paper. Amendment to Last Will and Testament. Section 4.2. Inheritance Clause. Matthew picked up the document, reading the words he'd memorized through rage and disbelief. The beneficiary must be married for a minimum of 1 calendar year before assuming control of Kirk Industries and associated assets. Marriage must be legally binding and publicly acknowledged. His grandfather's final manipulation from beyond the grave. The old man had watched Matthew build this empire from nothing, transform a failing manufacturing company into a tech conglomerate worth billions, work 100-hour weeks for 15 years, and decided it wasn't enough. Decided Matthew needed grounding, needed humanity, needed someone to make him whole. As if you could engineer love like you engineered market dominance. Matthew's phone buzzed. His assistant, Rebecca, ever efficient, ever knowing when he'd still be here. The message was brief. Found 3 candidates. Background checks complete. Profiles attached. 3 women willing to marry a stranger for money. He should feel something about that. Disgust, maybe, or at least irony. Instead, he felt nothing but the familiar weight of another problem requiring a solution. Marriage was a contract. Love was a liability. He'd learned that at 8 years old, hiding in his closet while his mother threw plates and his father threw punches, both screaming about a love that had curdled into poison. No. Better to approach this like any other acquisition. Clean terms. Clear exit strategy. No feelings to fester into violence. His finger hovered over the first profile when his gaze caught on the untouched dinner growing cold on his desk. Same meal Rebecca ordered him every night, same meal he barely tasted. Beyond it, face down on the credenza, was the only family photo he kept. Him at 7, his mother's arm around his shoulders, both of them smiling at a father who'd already started disappearing into bottles and rage. Matthew turned the frame further down. He had 6 weeks to find a wife or lose everything he'd built. 6 weeks to manufacture what his grandfather thought he lacked. He'd negotiated hostile takeovers with less at stake and better odds. Across the city, in a world Matthew Kirk's money couldn't quite touch, Jasmine Kenneth was learning that dignity had a price point. "I don't want your pity tip, Mr. Vanderbilt." Her voice was steady, professional, even as she slid the $100 bill back across the table toward the silver-haired man in the $6,000 suit. The restaurant, Oriole, where Manhattan's elite came to be seen, had fallen into that strange late-night hush when only the truly wealthy remained, the ones who didn't worry about tomorrow's alarm clocks. Mr. Vanderbilt frowned, genuinely confused. "It's not pity. You were excellent tonight. The meal was $300. Your credit card receipt shows a 20% tip already included. This," she gestured at the bill, "is you feeling good about yourself because I mentioned I'm putting myself through night classes." She kept her smile in place, the one she'd perfected in 12 years of service industry survival. "I don't need charity. I need to earn my way." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or just the novelty of being challenged. He pocketed the bill with a nod. "My mistake, Ms. Kenneth." When he left, Jasmine exhaled slowly, her hand trembling slightly as she cleared the table. Behind her, her coworker Marcus whistled low. "Girl, you just turned down $100. He was paying for a feeling, not service. She stacked plates with practiced efficiency, the muscle memory of 1,000 shifts. I'm not in the business of making rich people feel generous. You're in the business of making rent, Marcus countered, not unkindly. Philosophy doesn't pay for your certification exam. He wasn't wrong. The medical billing certification that would finally get her out of waitressing cost $1,200. Money she'd been saving for 8 months. Money that kept getting devoured by life's emergencies. Last month, her laptop died. This month, her landlord raised the rent. Next month, who knew? But she'd clawed her way out of too many dark places to compromise now. Jasmine Kenneth survived on her terms, or not at all. She'd learned that at 10 years old, standing in a group home common room while a social worker explained her mother wasn't coming back. Learned it again at 16 when her first foster family returned her like a defective product because she asked too many questions. Learned it at 23 when the man she'd almost loved told her she was too independent, too hard to be with, too proud to need anyone, too scared to try. By the time her shift ended at 2 a.m., Jasmine's feet ached and her face hurt from smiling. She changed out of her uniform in the cramped employee bathroom, pulling on jeans and a jacket that had seen better years, and stepped into the November cold. The subway ride home was empty enough to sit. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her banking app with the grim focus of someone doing triage. Rent. Due in 6 days. Current balance. $400 short, even with tonight's tips. She could pick up a double shift, miss her Tuesday exam prep class. Or she could call her former foster sister Desiree, who'd just gotten clean and couldn't afford to be anyone's safety net. Or, her thumb hovered over a text from an unknown number that had come through during her shift. Ms. Kenneth, my name is Rebecca Chen. I represent a client interested in discussing a unique professional opportunity. Compensation would be substantial. Are you available tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Jasmine had almost deleted it. Spam, scam, too good to be true. But something made her hesitate. Maybe desperation. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the universe's twisted sense of humor. She typed back, "What kind of opportunity?" The response came immediately. The kind that changes everything. Tribeca address attached. Business formal. Come alone. Jasmine stared at the message as the subway car rattled through darkness. Every instinct she'd honed through years of survival screamed this was trouble. Rich people didn't offer life-changing opportunities to waitresses without strings attached. Strings that usually strangled. But $400 short was $400 short. And Jasmine Kenneth had learned long ago that sometimes you had to walk through fire to get to the other side. She confirmed the meeting, pocketed her phone, and watched her reflection in the subway window. A woman who'd survived everything life threw at her, about to take the biggest gamble of her life. Neither she nor Matthew Kirk, awake in his sterile office across the city, knew that by tomorrow afternoon, their carefully controlled worlds would collide. And nothing would ever be the same. What would you do if a stranger offered you life-changing money but you didn't know what they wanted in return? Would you take the risk or walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The address led Jasmine to a building she'd only seen from street level. The kind of place where doormen wore better suits than most CEOs, and the lobby smelled like old money and newer ambitions. Ms. Kenneth, a woman in her 30s, approached, extending a hand. Asian features, sharp blazer, eyes that cataloged everything in seconds. Rebecca Chen. Thank you for coming. Jasmine shook her hand, matching the firm grip. You're very mysterious, Ms. Chen. Rebecca, please. And mystery is sometimes necessary. She gestured toward the elevators. My client values discretion. Your client has a name? He does. And he'll introduce himself. They rode to the 47th floor in silence, Jasmine's reflection in the polished elevator doors showing a woman who'd borrowed her best blazer from Desiree and hoped it read professional instead of trying too hard. She'd pulled her thick black hair into a sleek bun, applied minimal makeup, worn the only heels she owned that didn't hurt after 10 minutes. Armor for whatever battle this was. The elevator opened into a reception area more expensive than her entire apartment building. Rebecca led her through glass doors into a conference room dominated by windows and a table that could seat 20 but held only 2 people. Rebecca's assistant setting up documents, and Jasmine stopped breathing. She knew him. Not personally, But she'd served him coffee once, maybe 6 months ago, during a private breakfast meeting at Oriole. He'd been polite, distracted, hadn't looked at her beyond the cursory acknowledgement of service. Just another wealthy face in a parade of them. Matthew Kirk. She'd heard the name in the kitchen afterward. Tech billionaire, self-made, notoriously private. Tabloids called him Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. In articles he never acknowledged. He stood when she entered, and Jasmine fought the urge to check her own reflection. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, with dark hair silver-touched at the temples despite looking no older than 35. His suit probably cost more than her annual rent. But it was his eyes that caught her. Gray, intelligent, and deeply, profoundly tired. A man who'd stopped sleeping years ago and forgotten why it mattered. Ms. Kenneth. His voice matched his appearance. Controlled, measured, expensive. Thank you for meeting me. Please sit. Jasmine sat, spine straight, hands folded on the table. Every waitress instinct told her to smile, defer, smooth the edges. Every survival instinct told her to stay sharp. You know who I am. Matthew Kirk. Kirk Industries. Net worth somewhere north of $3 billion, depending on the stock market's mood. She held his gaze. And you know who I am, which is more concerning since I'm nobody. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. You're not nobody, Ms. Kenneth. According to Rebecca's research, you're a woman who's worked 3 jobs while finishing her bachelor's degree online, maintained a 3.8 GPA, raised enough money to put your former foster sister through rehab twice, and turned down a $100 tip last night because you don't accept charity. Heat crept up Jasmine's neck. You had me investigated. I had you vetted. There's a difference. He sat across from her, placing a leather portfolio on the table between them. I need something. You need something. I'm proposing a transaction that benefits us both. Transactions imply equal value exchange. We're not operating from equal positions, Mr. Kirk. Matthew, he corrected. And you're right. Which is why the compensation will be weighted in your favor. Jasmine leaned back, studying him. This close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the careful control in every gesture. A man who'd learned to weaponize stillness. What exactly are you buying? A year of your life. He opened the portfolio, revealing documents. I need a wife. You need financial security. I'm offering a marriage of mutual convenience. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jasmine's laugh came out sharp, disbelieving. You're joking. I don't joke about business. Matthew's expression didn't change. My grandfather's will contains a marriage clause. 1 year, legally binding, publicly acknowledged. After 12 months, we divorce quietly, you walk away with $2 million, and we both get what we need. $2 million. The number hit her like a physical thing. $2 million was Desiree's long-term treatment. Was her certification, her degree, her own apartment, her future. Was freedom from the constant calculation of survival. Was also impossible. Why me? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You could marry anyone. A socialite, someone from your world who understands. Someone from my world would have expectations, Matthew interrupted. Would want access to my life beyond the contract. Would see this as an opportunity for more. He met her eyes directly. You don't want more. You want out. That's the difference. You don't know what I want. Don't I? He leaned forward slightly. You've spent your entire life building walls so you don't need anyone. You survive alone because it's safer than depending on people who leave. A business arrangement with clear terms and an exit date? That's not threatening. That's your comfort zone. Jasmine felt exposed, seen in a way that made her want to leave immediately. You're wrong about me. Then prove it. Walk away. He pushed the documents toward her. Or read the contract and make an informed decision. She should walk away. Every rational cell in her body screamed to run from this beautiful broken man offering to buy a year of her life. This wasn't how people solved problems. This wasn't $2 million. Jasmine pulled the documents closer, scanning the dense legal text. Matthew watched her read, his expression unreadable. "Page 7, he said quietly. "The terms." She flipped to it. "Terms of agreement. Legal marriage ceremony within 2 weeks of contract signing. Cohabitation at primary residence, Kirk Penthouse, Manhattan. Public appearances as required, estimated 4 to 6 events monthly. Separate private quarters maintained. No physical intimacy required or expected. Complete discretion regarding contractual nature. Compensation: $2 million upon completion of 12-month term. Early termination by either party results in prorated compensation. NDA binding in perpetuity. Separate quarters," Jasmine read aloud. "So this is purely professional," Matthew finished. "You'd have your own space, your own life. We'd maintain appearances publicly, nothing more. Think of it as a very well-compensated acting role. For a year. 365 days. Then you're free and I secure my inheritance." Jasmine set down the papers, studying him with new intensity. "What happened to you that made marriage feel like a prison sentence worth $2 million to escape?" For the first time, something cracked in his controlled facade, a flash of old pain quickly shuddered. "The same thing that happened to you that made you learn to survive alone." He straightened. "We're not that different, Ms. Kenneth. We both know love is a luxury neither of us can afford." The truth of it settled between them like glass. "I need time to think," Jasmine said finally. "You have 24 hours. Matthew stood extending his hand. "Rebecca will answer any questions. But Ms. Kenneth, whatever you decide, this conversation stays confidential." She stood, taking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and she felt the calluses on his palm. Unexpected on a billionaire. Evidence of someone who'd built something with his own hands before the money came. "One question," Jasmine said, not releasing his hand yet. "Why does this matter so much?" "The inheritance. You're already wealthy." Matthew's jaw tightened. "Because my grandfather tried to control me my entire life, and I'll be damned if I let him do it from the grave. This company is mine. I built it. And I'm not losing it because some old man thought I needed fixing." He paused. "And you? Why are you even considering this?" Jasmine thought of Desiree's last relapse, of the group homegirl she used to be, of every door that had closed in her face because she didn't have the right background, right money, right connections. "Because I'm tired of surviving," she said quietly. "I want to live." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Kinship. "Then we understand each other." He released her hand. 24 hours, Ms. Kenneth." Jasmine didn't sleep that night. She sat on her apartment floor, contract spread before her, calculator and notepad beside her, running numbers until her eyes blurred. $2 million. Minus taxes, still more than she'd earn in 30 years of waitressing. Her phone buzzed. "Desiree. Hey sis, you okay? You've been quiet." Jasmine stared at the message, then at the contract's NDA clause. If she signed, she couldn't tell anyone the truth. Not Desiree. Not Marcus. No one could know her marriage was bought and paid for. She'd be lying to everyone for a year. But she'd also be saving Desiree. Saving herself. At 4 a.m. she picked up her phone and texted Rebecca. "I have questions." At 4:02 a.m. Rebecca called. They talked for an hour. Logistics, legalities, contingencies. Rebecca answered everything with the same professional efficiency, never judgmental, never surprised. As if arranging contract marriages was just another Tuesday. When they hung up, Jasmine had one question left. One only Matthew Kirk could answer. At 6 a.m. she texted him directly. "If I sign this and somewhere in the next year one of us wants out, really wants out, what happens?" His response came instantly, as if he'd been awake too. "Then we talk. Like adults. No one is trapped here, Ms. Kenneth. That's the point." Jasmine read the message 3 times. No one is trapped here. She thought of every home she'd been trapped in, every situation she'd had to claw her way out of, every relationship that felt like a cage. This man was offering her a cage with a key. One she'd hold herself. At 10 a.m., she walked into Kirk Industries wearing the same borrowed blazer, carrying a pen she'd owned since high school. The only one that had survived every move, every eviction, every fresh start. Matthew was waiting in the conference room, Rebecca beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Ms. Kenneth." He stood. "Your decision." Jasmine approached the table, contract waiting, her entire future balanced on a signature. She thought of 10-year-old her in the group home. She thought of 20-year-old her sleeping in her car. She thought of yesterday's her, $400 short of rent. She thought of who she could become with $2 million and a year to build something real. "I have one condition," she said. "Not in the contract. Between us." Matthew nodded. "Name it. We're honest with each other. Not about our pasts if we don't want to share. Not about our feelings if we don't have them. But about this arrangement. If it's not working, if something needs to change, we tell each other the truth." She held his gaze. "Can you do that?" He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gray eyes. "Yes." "Then I'm in." She picked up the pen, signed her name in steady strokes across 3 documents. Jasmine Kenneth, selling a year of her life to a stranger, for reasons that made sense only to the desperate and the broken. Matthew signed beside her, his signature a slash of controlled certainty. Rebecca witnessed, stamped, organized. "Congratulations," she said with a small smile. "You're engaged." Jasmine looked at Matthew Kirk, her fiancé, her employer, her exit strategy, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. He extended his hand again. "To a successful partnership, Ms. Kenneth." She shook it, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his grip, the weight of what they'd just agreed to. "Jasmine," she corrected. "If we're getting married, you should probably use my first name." For the first time, Matthew Kirk smiled. It was small, cautious, unpracticed, but real. "Jasmine," he repeated. "Welcome to the family business." Neither of them knew that in signing those papers, they'd just set in motion something far more dangerous than a business arrangement. They'd given themselves permission to discover who they were when no one was watching. And that discovery would change everything. The wedding happened on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays held any romantic significance, but because Matthew's lawyers advised that Wednesday's court docket was backed up and Friday would look too eager to the media if photos leaked. So Tuesday it was. Jasmine stood in the courthouse bathroom, staring at her reflection in a mirror that had witnessed 1,000 hasty touch-ups before 1,000 other life-changing moments. She'd chosen a simple cream dress, elegant enough for photographs, practical enough not to feel like a costume. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore the only jewelry she owned. Small gold hoops her mother had given her 2 weeks before the cancer took her. "You look beautiful," Rebecca said from behind her, adjusting her own tablet where she'd been coordinating schedules. "Nervous?" "Should I be?" Jasmine met her eyes in the mirror. "It's just paperwork. Paperwork that legally binds you to one of the most scrutinized men in Manhattan." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I've worked for Matthew for 8 years. He's a good man. Difficult, controlled to the point of suffocation, emotionally unavailable, but good." That's quite an endorsement. It's an honest one. Rebecca checked her watch. "We're due in courtroom 3B in 4 minutes. Matthew's already there with his lawyer. Are you ready?" Was she? Jasmine turned from the mirror, smoothing her dress one final time. "As ready as anyone is to marry a stranger for money." "For security," Rebecca corrected gently. "There's a difference." They walked through corridors that smelled of industrial cleaner and old anxiety, past other couples. Some glowing with joy, others grim with obligation. Jasmine wondered which category she and Matthew fell into, then decided they'd created their own. Transactional, clinical, survival. Courtroom 3B was smaller than she'd expected. Matthew stood near the judge's bench, talking quietly with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. His lawyer, presumably. He'd worn charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, looking every inch the billionaire groom. When he heard them enter, he turned. Their eyes met across the empty gallery. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition of the absurdity, maybe, or just two people acknowledging they were about to jump off the same cliff together. Then Matthew's expression smoothed into neutral politeness, and Jasmine remembered. This was a performance. The first of many. Ms. Kenneth. He approached, extending his arm formally. You look lovely. Thank you. She took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric. You clean up well yourself. Shall we? The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, gestured them forward. I have 6 more ceremonies this afternoon, so let's keep this efficient. Efficient. Perfect word for a marriage built on contracts instead of vows. They stood before the judge, hands joined because that's what the moment required. Matthew's palm was warm, steady. Jasmine's was ice-cold, and she saw him notice, saw a flicker of something, concern, cross his face before he squeezed gently. A silent reassurance that felt dangerously close to real. The judge read the standard ceremony, stripped of poetry and promise. No for better or worse. No till death do us part. Just legal language and binding agreements. When she asked if they consented, they both said, I do, with the inflection of people signing a lease, not pledging their lives. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you legally married. You may kiss. Jasmine's heart stopped. They hadn't discussed this. Hadn't practiced. The contract said, no physical intimacy required or expected. But here they were, expected to perform the oldest ritual of marriage in front of witnesses. Matthew leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she didn't. Instead, she met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss so brief, so chaste, it barely qualified, except for the way her breath caught and his hand tightened on hers, and for one impossible second, it felt like something more than theater. Then it was over. Congratulations, the judge said, already shuffling papers for the next couple. Marriage certificate will be mailed within 3 weeks. That was it. 14 minutes from single to married. From Jasmine Kenneth to Jasmine Kirk. The weight of the new name settled on her shoulders like a coat that didn't quite fit. Outside, a black car waited. Matthew's driver, discreet and professional. They slid into the back seat, suddenly alone together in a way they hadn't been since signing the contract 3 days ago. Silence filled the space between them. So, Jasmine said finally, watching Manhattan blur past the tinted windows. What now? Now you move into the penthouse. Matthew's voice was carefully neutral. Rebecca arranged for movers to pack your apartment this afternoon. Your belongings will be in your quarters by tonight. My quarters. She turned to look at him. You make it sound like I'm staff. That's not what He stopped, jaw tightening. The East Wing is yours. Master suite, private bathroom, sitting room. Completely separate from my space in the West Wing. You'll have privacy. Privacy in a shared home with a stranger I just married. How modern. You knew the terms, Jasmine. Knowing them and living them are different things, Matthew. His gray eyes met hers, sharp with something she couldn't quite read. If you're having regrets. I'm not. She held his gaze. I'm just getting used to my new reality. Give me a minute to process that I'm now Mrs. Matthew Kirk, billionaire's wife, when yesterday I was Jasmine Kenneth, waitress who couldn't make rent. You're still Jasmine Kenneth, he said quietly. The name on the certificate doesn't change who you are. Doesn't it? She looked away. Everything about my life just changed. Yours stayed exactly the same, except now you have a legal wife who sleeps in a different wing. The car pulled up to a building that made her courthouse bathroom mirror moment seem quaint. The doorman opened her door before she could process the gold-trimmed entrance or the way people on the sidewalk stared at Matthew's car like they recognized power when they saw it. Mr. Kirk, Mrs. Kirk. The doorman's greeting made Jasmine flinch. Welcome home. Home. Right. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Matthew stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ascending floor numbers like they held answers to questions he hadn't asked. Jasmine studied her reflection in the polished doors, a woman in a cream dress who'd just married a man she didn't love, for reasons that made sense only in the harsh mathematics of survival. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Jasmine stepped out and forgot to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan in daylight glory. Central Park a green sprawl to the north, the city's steel and glass ambition in every direction. The space was enormous, decorated in shades of gray and white and chrome, beautiful and sterile as a museum. Modern art that probably cost more than her old apartment hung on walls that had never heard laughter. Furniture arranged for aesthetics, not comfort. A home that had never been lived in, just occupied. East Wing is this way. Matthew gestured right, already moving. I'll show you your space. He led her through a corridor lined with more expensive art, past a kitchen bigger than her entire former apartment, to a set of double doors. This is you, he said, pushing them open. The suite was bigger than anything Jasmine had imagined. King bed with white linens, sitting area with a view, bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in, walk-in closet currently empty except for the clothes Rebecca had apparently already arranged to be purchased. Designer labels Jasmine didn't recognize, sizes that would somehow fit perfectly. Rebecca took the liberty of ordering essentials, Matthew said, watching her take it all in. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, just let her know. There's a credit card in the desk drawer, no limit. Use it for whatever you need. Whatever I need, Jasmine repeated slowly. Except the one thing that would make this feel less like a cage. Which is honesty. She turned to face him. We just got married, Matthew. We're going to be living under the same roof for a year. And we're standing here like strangers at a hotel, being polite and distant. Is this really how you want to do this? His expression hardened. This is exactly how I want to do this. Clear boundaries. Separate lives. No messy complications. I'm not asking for complications. I'm asking if we can at least be, I don't know, civil? Friendly. She gestured between them. Or are we going to spend 12 months walking past each other like ghosts? Friendly implies investment. Matthew's voice went cold, controlled. The businessman shutting down a negotiation. Investment implies attachment. Attachment makes the ending harder. So your plan is to what? Ignore me for a year except when we're performing for cameras. My plan is to honor the contract we both signed. He moved toward the door. I'll be in my office if you need anything. Dinner is at 7 separate, unless we have a public engagement. Rebecca will send you the social calendar. Welcome home, Mrs. Kirk. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut with quiet finality. Jasmine stood in her new prison beautiful suite, surrounded by luxury she'd never asked for, married to a man who just made it clear she was a problem to be managed, not a person to be known. She should feel grateful. $2 million grateful. Instead, she felt furious. The first week was a masterclass in avoidance. Matthew left the penthouse before Jasmine woke and returned after she'd retreated to her wing. They communicated through Rebecca. Schedule changes, public appearance preparations, logistics. When they did cross paths in the common areas, he nodded politely and disappeared. Professional. Distant. Exactly what he'd promised. Exactly what was driving Jasmine insane. She'd expected awkwardness. Expected adjustment. But this was living with a ghost who happened to pay her bills. On Friday night, they had their first public event, a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Matthew's driver collected them at 7, both dressed for performance. Him in a tuxedo that made him look like old money incarnate. Her in a sapphire gown Rebecca had selected that probably cost more than Jasmine used to make in 6 months. You look beautiful, Matthew said as they descended to the car. His tone was the same he'd used to comment on the weather. Thank you. You look expensive. Jasmine slid into the back seat, arranging the gown's fabric. Do we need to discuss how this works? Public appearances. We're a newlywed couple. He settled beside her, maintaining careful distance. We're happy, attentive to each other, occasionally touch in ways that suggest intimacy without requiring it. Smile. Laugh at my jokes even if they're not funny. Let me introduce you proudly. Simple. Simple, she echoed. Lie to everyone about everything. We're not lying. We're managing perception. His gray eyes met hers in the dim car light. Unless you'd prefer to tell every reporter the truth about our arrangement? Of course not. I'm just... She stopped, frustrated with herself. Never mind. What? Nothing. It's fine. Jasmine. His voice held an edge. If we're doing this, don't do that. Do what? Say nothing when there's clearly something. I can't read your mind. She laughed bitterly. You don't want to read my mind, Matthew. You've made that clear. You want me in my wing, you in yours, both of us performing when necessary and invisible otherwise. That's the agreement. I know it's the agreement. Her voice rose despite herself. But maybe I'm realizing that living like strangers under the same roof for a year is harder than I thought it would be. Maybe I'm discovering that I don't know how to be someone's wife, even a fake one, when they won't even have coffee with me in the morning. Silence stretched between them, thick with words neither knew how to say. I don't do coffee talk, Matthew said finally, quietly. I don't do casual intimacy. It leads places I don't go. Because of your parents. His head snapped toward her. Rebecca told you? She told me you're controlled to the point of suffocation. I filled in the rest. Jasmine studied his profile in the passing streetlights. My mother died when I was 10. I spent the next 8 years in foster care, bouncing between families who saw me as either free labor or a monthly check. I learned that needing people meant getting hurt. So I stopped needing anyone. She paused. I'm guessing your story ends somewhere similar. Matthew's jaw worked, tension radiating through his shoulders. My father drank. My mother stayed until she couldn't anymore, then disappeared. I was 8. He raised me until I was old enough to raise myself. His voice was flat, reciting facts. Love in that house was a weapon. Affection meant manipulation. So yes, I learned the same lesson you did. Needing people is dangerous. Then we understand each other. Do we? He turned to face her fully. Because from where I'm sitting, you're asking for exactly what we both agreed was too dangerous. I'm asking for baseline human decency, Jasmine countered. For us to acknowledge each other's existence beyond contractual obligations. That's not love, Matthew. That's just not being lonely in the same house. And if it becomes more than that, it won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. She held his gaze. But we could at least try to make this year bearable instead of miserable. The car slowed, pulling up to the museum where photographers already lined the entrance, cameras ready to devour whatever story Matthew Kirk and his new mysterious wife would provide. We're here, Matthew said, breaking eye contact. Time to perform. His hand found hers, warm and solid, as the door opened and camera flashes exploded like artillery fire. Jasmine stepped out into the lights, into the role of Matthew Kirk's adoring wife, and felt the mask slip into place with practiced ease. She smiled. She clung to his arm. She laughed at his jokes, which actually were funny when he bothered to make them. And Matthew. He transformed. In public, he was attentive, affectionate, perfect. His hand stayed at the small of her back. He introduced her with genuine pride. When a society matron made a thinly veiled comment about Jasmine's humble background, Matthew's response was sharp enough to draw blood. My wife's background is one of survival and strength, qualities more valuable than inherited wealth could ever provide. Jasmine felt something crack in her chest at the unexpected defense. They danced, moved through crowds, posed for photographs where his arm wrapped around her waist and her head tilted toward his shoulder, and anyone looking would swear they were madly in love. The performance was flawless, which made the car ride home even more devastating. Because the moment they were alone again, Matthew retreated, physically shifted away. The warmth in his eyes cooled to professional neutrality. By the time they reached the penthouse, he was already checking his phone, building walls faster than she could identify them. Good work tonight, he said as the elevator doors opened. Very convincing. Was it? Jasmine stepped out, suddenly exhausted. Or were we just lying better? Does it matter? To me? Yes. She turned to face him. Because that man at the gala, the one who defended me, who danced with me like I mattered, I could work with him for a year. But this man. She gestured at his closed-off expression. The one who treats me like a business obligation? Him I don't know how to live with. Matthew's expression didn't change. Then I suggest you figure it out, Mrs. Kirk. Because he's all you're getting. He walked to his wing without looking back. Jasmine stood alone in the common area, the city glittering 47 floors below, and felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to. A year in a beautiful prison with a beautiful man who was terrified of his own heart. She just hadn't realized she'd be terrified of hers too. Because somewhere between the courthouse and the gala and this moment, she'd started hoping for something neither of them had promised. The possibility that pretending could become real. And that hope was the most dangerous thing in this entire arrangement. Have you ever had to put up walls to protect yourself, only to realize those walls were keeping out the very thing you needed? How did you find the courage to let them down? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. The text came at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, 3 weeks into their carefully orchestrated dance of avoidance. Jasmine was in the kitchen, her first time venturing into the common spaces during Matthew's usual schedule, making coffee when her phone buzzed. Rebecca. Emergency. Matthew's grandmother arriving today at 2 p.m. for 1-week visit. She doesn't know about the arrangement. You'll need to share the master bedroom. Matthew is being briefed now. Meeting in 30 minutes. Jasmine read it twice. Coffee forgotten. Share a bedroom. With Matthew. For a week. She looked up to find the man himself standing in the kitchen doorway, still in pajama pants and a t-shirt, the most casual she'd ever seen him. His hair was uncombed, face unshaven, and somehow the vulnerability of his appearance made him more intimidating, not less. You saw Rebecca's message. Not a question. Your grandmother doesn't know this is fake. My grandmother thinks I finally found someone worthy of the Kirk name. His voice was tight with something that might have been anger or fear. She's 87, traditional, and the only family member I actually give a damn about. So yes, for the next week, we maintain the illusion more carefully than we ever have before. Jasmine set down her mug. Define carefully. We share my bedroom. We know details about each other's lives. We have history, inside jokes, habits of intimacy. He crossed to the coffee maker, pouring his own cup with jerky movements. She'll ask invasive questions. She'll watch us constantly. She'll expect to see a marriage, not a business arrangement. So we lie to a dying woman. Matthew's hand stilled on the mug. She's not dying. Matthew, she's 87. You said she's the only family you care about. Jasmine gentled her voice. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, this matters to you. He was quiet for a long moment. She raised me after my mother left, took me out of my father's house, gave me safety when I thought safe didn't exist anymore. She's the reason I survived childhood. His knuckles went white on the mug. And she spent the last 15 years worried I'll die alone because I'm too closed off, too much like your grandfather. Finding out I married someone would make her happy, in a way nothing else has in years. The raw honesty in his voice cracked something in Jasmine's chest. Okay, she said simply. Then we make her happy. He looked at her, really looked, surprise flickering across his features. Just like that. You defended me to that awful woman at the gala. You've been nothing but respectful of our boundaries even though I keep pushing them. She shrugged. Consider this me returning the favor. Besides, I'm pretty good at pretending. 8 years of foster care taught me how to be whoever people needed me to be. Something dark crossed Matthew's expression. That's not something to be proud of. Didn't say I was proud. Said I was good at it. She picked up her coffee again. So, what do I need to know about you to convince your grandmother we're madly in love? The next 30 minutes were a crash course in Matthew Kirk's life. They sat at the kitchen island, the first time they'd shared a space voluntarily, while he rattled off facts with the efficiency of a deposing witness. Allergic to shellfish, drinks coffee black, reads before bed, runs every morning at 5 a.m., prefers silence to music, hates small talk, loves old movies but denies it, has a scar on his left shoulder from a childhood fall, takes his suits to the same tailor his grandfather used. Favorite color? Jasmine asked, taking notes. I don't have one. Everyone has one. I don't think about things like that. Then pick one right now. Your grandmother will definitely ask. Matthew stared at her like she'd requested nuclear codes. Gray. That's the least surprising answer in human history. Jasmine couldn't help smiling. Favorite food? Food is fuel. Matthew. He exhaled sharply. My grandmother makes this Italian wedding soup. I'd eat it every day if I could. There. A crack in the armor. See? That wasn't so hard. Your turn. He pulled out his phone, ready to take notes. I know the basics from Rebecca's file, but grandmother will want details. First kiss. Jasmine felt heat creep up her neck. Tommy Rodriguez. 8th grade. Behind the gym. Terrible. Why terrible? Too much tongue, not enough finesse. She laughed at his expression. What? You asked. First love. The laughter died. Next question. Jasmine. I don't talk about him. Her voice went flat. Pick something else. Matthew studied her, and she braced for pushing for demands. Instead, okay. Biggest fear. She appreciated the subject change even as the new question hit harder. Being invisible. Mattering to no one. The honesty surprised her. You. Becoming my father. The words hung between them, stark and vulnerable. You won't, Jasmine said quietly. You're too controlled for that. That's what scares me. Matthew's gray eyes met hers. What if the control breaks? Before she could answer, Rebecca arrived with luggage, instructions, and a timeline that left no room for existential conversations. They had 6 hours to transform the master bedroom into a lived-in couple space, memorize each other's tells, and construct a believable history. 6 hours to fake years of intimacy. The master bedroom was even larger than Jasmine's suite, dominated by a California king bed that suddenly seemed both enormous and far too small. Matthew's space was meticulously organized. Books arranged by height, closet color coordinated, not a single personal item that revealed anything real. We need to make this look like I live here too, Jasmine said, surveying the sterile space. Your grandmother will notice if all my things are segregated. What do you suggest? Move over. She started opening his drawers, pulling out perfectly folded shirts. We mix our clothes. Put my products in your bathroom. Leave a book on my side of the bed. Small things that suggest shared lives. Matthew watched her reorganize his space with an expression somewhere between horror and fascination. When she tossed one of her sweaters over his reading chair, he actually flinched. It's just for a week, she reminded him. Right. A week. He picked up her sweater, held it like it might detonate. Where should I? Leave it there. It looks natural. She moved to the bed, testing which side. Which side do you sleep on? The right. Good. I'll take the left. She sat down, bouncing slightly. This mattress is incredible. Is this what rich people sleep on? It's just a mattress. It's a cloud. She lay back, starfishing. Oh my God. I'm never leaving this bed. You're going to have to eventually. Spoil sport. She sat up, suddenly aware of the intimacy of lying on his bed while he watched. Sorry. Got carried away. You're. He paused, something soft entering his expression. You're very different from what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more like me. Closed off. Transactional. He sat on the opposite side of the bed. His side. But you're not. You push boundaries. You laugh. You take over my kitchen and leave sweaters on my furniture and somehow make this sterile apartment feel. Feel what? Less empty. The admission seemed to cost him. I don't know if that's good or dangerous. Jasmine turned to face him across the expanse of mattress. Maybe it's both. Their eyes met, held, and for a moment the air between them charged with something neither could name. Then Matthew's phone buzzed, Rebecca with an update. And the moment shattered. They spent the next 5 hours building their fiction, deciding they'd met at a charity event 6 months ago, that he'd pursued her despite her resistance, that she'd said yes to dinner because he'd made her laugh, that the wedding had been quick because when you know, you know. Lies built on fragments of truth, wrapped in just enough possibility to be believable. By 1:45 p.m., they were ready. The bedroom looked lived in. They'd memorized each other's coffee orders, childhood pets, college majors. They'd practiced casual touch until it felt almost natural. His hand at her waist, her fingers on his arm. At 1:58 p.m., the doorman called up. "Mrs. Whitmore is on her way up, Mr. Kirk." Matthew's jaw tightened. Jasmine saw the tension flood through him. This mattered so much it terrified him. Without thinking, she took his hand. "Hey, we've got this." He looked down at their joined hands, then at her. "Why are you being so kind? I've been terrible to you for 3 weeks. Because I know what it's like to desperately want someone's approval." She squeezed his fingers. "And because maybe we're better as a team than as strangers." The elevator dinged. Matthew squeezed back. Together. Together. The doors opened, and a tiny woman emerged who couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall but carried herself like a queen. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, sharp dark eyes that missed nothing, wearing pearls and a Chanel suit that had probably cost more than Jasmine's first car. "Matthew." Her voice was surprisingly strong. "Where is she? Where is this miracle woman who finally cracked through that armor of yours?" Matthew's entire demeanor shifted, tension melting into something genuine and warm that Jasmine had never seen from him. "Grandmother." He embraced her carefully, like she was precious. "Welcome home. Don't welcome home me. Introduce me to your wife before I die of suspense." He turned, extending his hand to Jasmine. She took it, letting him draw her forward into the moment that would make or break their entire charade. "Grandmother, this is Jasmine. My wife." His voice carried a pride that felt dangerously real. "Jasmine, this is Catherine Whitmore. The woman who saved my life." Catherine's dark eyes fixed on Jasmine with an intensity that stripped away every defense. For a long, terrible moment, Jasmine was certain the old woman could see straight through their performance to the contract beneath. Then Catherine smiled. Warm, genuine, delighted. "Oh, Matthew. She's beautiful." She took Jasmine's hands in her own surprisingly strong grip. "And you, my dear. Thank you." Jasmine blinked. "For what?" "For giving me hope that my grandson remembers how to be human." Catherine patted her cheek. "Now, show me everything. I want to hear how you two met, why you married so quickly, and," her eyes twinkled with mischief, "what you possibly see in this stubborn, emotionally constipated man I raised." "Grandmother," Matthew protested. "Oh, hush. If she married you, she already knows what you are." Catherine linked her arm through Jasmine's. "Come. We'll have tea and you'll tell me everything while Matthew pretends he's not terrified I'll embarrass him." As Catherine led her toward the living room, Jasmine glanced back at Matthew. He looked caught between horror and affection, and for the first time since she'd met him, fully, genuinely alive. She realized with creeping certainty that this week was going to change everything. Because pretending to love Matthew Kirk in front of the one person he actually loved? That required showing the version of him he kept hidden. And once she saw that version, she might never be able to unsee it. That night, after hours of tea and stories and laughter Jasmine hadn't expected, she and Matthew finally retreated to the master bedroom. Their shared bedroom. With one bed. "I'll sleep on the couch," Matthew said immediately, grabbing a pillow. "She'll notice if you're stiff and uncomfortable in the morning." Jasmine was already pulling back the covers. "It's a massive bed. We'll build a pillow wall if you want." "Jasmine." "Matthew, I'm not going to attack you in your sleep." She climbed in, positioning herself at the far edge. "See? Miles of space. You won't even know I'm here." He stood there, pillow clutched defensively, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. I don't sleep well with other people." Have you tried recently? Not since. He stopped. Not in 15 years. 15 years. Since his mother left. God. Then maybe it's time, Jasmine said softly. Maybe it won't be as terrible as you remember. After a long moment, Matthew set down the pillow and climbed into bed, maintaining careful distance. They lay in darkness, the city glowing beyond the windows, both acutely aware of the other's breathing. She really loves you, Jasmine said quietly. Your grandmother. She's the only person who ever has. The loneliness in his voice broke something in her. That's not true anymore. Jasmine, we're not. I know what we are. She turned her head on the pillow to look at him. But maybe we could also be friends. Real ones, not just contract partners. In the dim light, she saw him turn to face her too. I don't know how to be someone's friend. Lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher. She smiled. Lesson 1. Friends tell each other good night. Good night, Jasmine. Good night, Matthew. Silence settled between them, but somehow less lonely than before. As Jasmine drifted toward sleep, she felt the bed shift slightly. Matthew moving infinitesimally closer, not touching but closer. As if even in sleep, some part of him was learning he didn't have to be alone. And in that moment, lying in the darkness with a man she barely knew but was starting to understand, Jasmine realized the most dangerous thing about their arrangement wasn't the contract or the money or the eventual ending. It was how easy it was becoming to forget they were pretending. The third night with Catherine in the penthouse, Jasmine woke to find Matthew's side of the bed empty. The clock read 3:47 a.m. Moonlight sliced through the windows, painting everything silver and shadow. She lay still for a moment, listening. Then she heard it. Muffled sounds from the bathroom. Running water. Harsh breathing. She should stay in bed. Should respect his privacy. Should remember they were just playing roles. Instead, she got up. The bathroom door was cracked open, light spilling out. Through the gap, she could see Matthew leaning over the sink, knuckles white on the marble edge, face dripping with water he'd clearly splashed to shock himself awake. Matthew. She pushed the door open gently. He jerked upright, eyes wild for a second before recognition settled in. Go back to bed. Not until you tell me what's wrong. Nothing's wrong. I don't sleep well. You know this. This isn't not sleeping well. This is. She saw his hands trembling. Are you okay? I'm fine. But his voice was too tight, too controlled. Just a nightmare. It happens sometimes. Jasmine moved closer, careful, like approaching something wounded. What was it about? It doesn't matter. Matthew. I said it doesn't matter. The words came out harsher than he intended. She saw him immediately regret it, saw him pull back into himself. Sorry. I'm sorry. Just go back to bed, Jasmine. Please. She should give him space and dignity and all the distance he was desperately trying to maintain. But something in his eyes, the raw fear he couldn't quite hide, made her stay. When I was 12, she said quietly, I had a foster mother who locked me in the basement during storms. Said I was too dramatic about the thunder, that I needed to learn fear was weakness. She leaned against the doorframe. For years after, I couldn't be in enclosed spaces during bad weather without having panic attacks. Still can't sometimes. Matthew stared at her, some of the wildness leaving his eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because nightmares are just our brains trying to process trauma. And because I spent too many years pretending I was fine when I wasn't. She held his gaze. You don't have to tell me what yours was about. But you also don't have to pretend with me. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I dream about doors closing. My mother's car driving away. Being 8 years old and realizing she chose leaving over staying with me. His jaw worked. And I dream about becoming him. My father. Losing control. Hurting someone He stopped abruptly. Someone you what? Someone I'm supposed to protect. He turned away, reaching for a towel. It's irrational. I'm nothing like him. I've spent my entire adult life building control so I never could be. That's not irrational. That's trauma. Jasmine moved to stand beside him at the sink. But Matthew, you know you're not him, right? Your father hurt people because he wanted power. You push people away because you're afraid of hurting them. Those aren't the same thing. Aren't they? His reflection met hers in the mirror. I've hurt people. Business rivals. Employees who didn't meet expectations. I can be cruel when I need to be. Being tough in business isn't the same as domestic violence. How do you know? The question came out desperate. How do you know where the line is? Because I don't. I never learned what healthy looks like. All I know is my father loved my mother, and that love turned him into a monster. So I decided never to love anyone. Except your grandmother. Except her. He set down the towel carefully. And even that terrifies me. Because what if one day I snap? What if all this control I've built is just a dam waiting to break? Jasmine's heart cracked for this man who'd locked himself in a prison of his own making. Can I tell you what I see? I don't. You sleep on the far edge of the bed even though you clearly have nightmares, because you don't want to accidentally disturb me. You notice when your grandmother is tired before she admits it. You defended me to strangers because someone insulted my background. She touched his arm gently. You're so busy being afraid of becoming a monster that you don't see you're already one of the most careful, considerate people I've ever met. Matthew looked at her hand on his arm like he didn't understand what touch without ulterior motives felt like. You don't know me well enough to say that. Then let me know you better. The words came out before she could stop them. We have this week where we're forced to share space anyway. What if we actually used it? Actually told each other real things instead of just performing? That's dangerous. So is living your whole life afraid of your own heart. They stood there in the harsh bathroom light, both aware they were at a precipice. One more step and they'd be in territory neither had agreed to explore. Matthew's phone buzzed in the bedroom, a calendar alert. 5 a.m. His usual running time. The spell broke. I need to run, he said, stepping back. Clear my head. Okay. Jasmine let him retreat, recognizing the walls going back up. But Matthew, thank you for telling me about your dream. He paused at the door. Why does it matter to you? Why do you keep pushing? Because I know what it's like to be alone in a crowded room. And because... She stopped, suddenly aware of how honest she was about to be. Because I'm starting to realize maybe we don't have to be alone anymore. Not for this year, anyway. Something shifted in his expression. Fear and hope warring for dominance. I don't know if I can give you what you're asking for. I'm not asking for anything except honesty. Can you give me that? After a long moment, he nodded once. Then he left to run, leaving Jasmine alone with the terrible realization that somewhere in the past 3 days, this had stopped being an act. She actually cared about Matthew Kirk. And that was the most dangerous development in their entire arrangement. Catherine noticed everything. That afternoon, Jasmine found her in the living room, photo albums spread across the coffee table. Matthew's childhood, preserved in images that told a story he'd never shared. Come sit, dear. Catherine patted the sofa beside her. I thought you'd like to see the man you married before he learned to hide. Jasmine sat, drawn by curiosity and the desire to understand this complicated man she'd legally bound herself to. The photos showed a towhead boy with serious eyes, rarely smiling but clearly loved by the elegant woman beside him. Young Catherine, less silver but equally sharp. He was always so solemn, Catherine said, touching one photo fondly. Even as a baby. As if he knew too much too soon. What was his childhood like? He doesn't talk about it much. Jasmine hoped the question sounded casual, like a wife seeking connection, not like someone mining for intelligence. Catherine's expression clouded. His parents should never have married. My son, Matthew's father, had demons he refused to face. Anger issues, drinking, violence. She said the word like it tasted bitter. Matthew's mother, Rebecca. Yes, he named his assistant after her, tried to fix him, tried to love him into healing, but you can't love someone into health when they refuse to do the work. She left. She had to. For her own survival. Catherine closed the album gently. But she left Matthew behind. 8 years old, thinking he was the reason she ran. That if he'd been better, quieter, more perfect, she would have stayed. Jasmine's throat tightened. That's not true. No. But trauma doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. Catherine turned to look at Jasmine directly. I got custody 6 months later, after Matthew showed up at school with bruises his father couldn't explain away. But those 8 years, plus the 6 months alone with a violent drunk, they shaped everything he became. Why are you telling me this? Because I see how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Catherine's dark eyes held knowing wisdom. Like he's terrified and hopeful at once. Like you're something precious he doesn't know how to hold. She took Jasmine's hand. My grandson has spent 33 years building walls so high, he forgot what sunshine feels like. But your light creeping through cracks he didn't know existed. Guilt twisted in Jasmine's stomach. This woman thought she was saving Matthew, when really she was just another transaction in his controlled world. I don't know if I'm what he needs, she said carefully. Oh, my dear. You're exactly what he needs. Someone who sees his wounds and doesn't run. Catherine squeezed her hand. The question is, are you brave enough to stay when he tries to push you away? Before Jasmine could answer, Matthew appeared in the doorway. His hair was still damp from the shower after his run, eyes slightly less haunted than at 3 a.m. but still carrying shadows. Am I interrupting? His gaze moved between them with poorly concealed wariness. Just showing your wife embarrassing childhood photos, Catherine said lightly. Every bride's right. Grandmother. Don't grandmother me. Jasmine should know about the time you decided to run away at age 9 and made it 3 blocks before getting scared and coming home. Her eyes twinkled. With a stray cat you'd decided to rescue. Despite everything, Matthew smiled slightly. Mr. Whiskers. He lived 16 years. You named a cat Mr. Whiskers? Jasmine couldn't help laughing. I was 9. And he had very prominent whiskers. The defensive tone was undercut by the warmth in his eyes. He was a good cat. He was a menace who destroyed my curtains and knocked over every plant I owned, Catherine corrected. But Matthew loved him, so I tolerated the chaos. Because love means tolerating chaos sometimes, Jasmine said softly, watching Matthew. He met her gaze, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a shared acknowledgement of what they were both learning. That control and love were fundamentally incompatible. I need to take a call, he said abruptly, breaking eye contact. International acquisition. Could take a few hours. Of course, dear. Catherine waved him away. We girls will entertain ourselves. When he left, Catherine turned to Jasmine with an expression that was far too knowing. He runs when things get too real. I've noticed. But he comes back. That's the difference. She reopened the photo album. Now, let me tell you about the time 13-year-old Matthew tried to build a business empire selling lemonade and ended up with ants in my kitchen. As Catherine shared stories, some funny, some heartbreaking, all revealing, Jasmine understood with growing clarity that she was being given a gift. The map to Matthew Kirk's heart, drawn by the one person who'd ever truly loved him. The question was what she'd do with that knowledge. That evening, after Catherine had retired to bed, Jasmine found Matthew on the balcony, nursing whiskey and staring at the city. Can I join you? He glanced at her and nodded. She settled into the chair beside him, pulling her cardigan tighter against the November chill. Your grandmother loves you very much, she said after a moment. I know. She told me about your parents. About what happened. His hand tightened on the glass. She had no right. She was trying to help me understand you. Jasmine kept her voice gentle. Help me be a better wife. The word hung between them, heavy with the weight of their deception. You're doing fine, Matthew said stiffly. She believes us completely. Does she? Or does she just want to believe so badly that she's willing to overlook the cracks? He turned to look at her. What cracks? The way we're too polite with each other. The way we don't have enough easy touches, the kind that come from real intimacy. The way you flinch every time I reach for your hand first. Jasmine held his gaze. Your grandmother is sharp, Matthew. She sees more than you think. Then what do you suggest? That we actually try. Not just for her benefit, but... She trailed off, uncertain how to finish. But what? But because maybe we both deserve to know what it feels like to not be alone for a while. Even if it's temporary. Even if it ends in 11 months. She drew a breath. I told you I wanted us to be friends. I meant it. Matthew was quiet for a long time, studying his whiskey like it held answers. When I was 13, I made a decision. I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me the way my parents hurt each other. No weakness. No vulnerability. No love. That's not living. That's just existing. It's safe. So is prison. Doesn't mean it's worth choosing. Jasmine leaned forward. What if, just for this year, we tried something different? What if we let ourselves actually connect? Actually care? And when it ends, we part as friends instead of strangers. And if it hurts, then it hurts. But at least we'll have felt something real. She reached for his free hand, half expecting him to pull away. He didn't. Matthew, you've spent so long being afraid of becoming your father. You forgot that he was broken because he never dealt with his pain. You face your pain every night at 3 a.m. You're already doing the work he never could. His thumb moved across her knuckles, unconscious and gentle. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. But so is spending the next 11 months in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, pretending to love each other while being too afraid to actually try friendship. She squeezed his hand. I vote we try. I vote we actually get to know each other. Real things, not just contract terms. Why? His voice was raw. Why does it matter to you? Because somewhere between the courthouse and the gala and his grandmother's stories, Jasmine had started to fall for this broken, beautiful man who thought he was a monster. Because when he smiled at his grandmother, she saw who he could be. Because his 3 a.m. nightmares broke her heart. Because she'd spent her whole life alone too, and suddenly the idea of having one person, just one, who truly knew her felt like oxygen after drowning. But she couldn't say any of that without admitting this had stopped being pretend. So instead, because you defended me when someone dismissed my background. Because you write checks for my foster sister without making me beg. Because you're gentle with your grandmother even when you're falling apart. She met his eyes. Because I see who you are under all that control, Matthew Kirk. And that person deserves to be known. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You barely know me. Then teach me. We have time. She smiled slightly. Besides, friends tell each other things. That was lesson 1. Time for lesson 2. Friends share their damage. My damage is considerable. So is mine. Jasmine didn't let him finish the deflection. But maybe our damage matches. Maybe two broken people can figure out how to be less broken together. Matthew's gray eyes searched hers, looking for the lie, the angle, the eventual betrayal. She let him look, let him see she was offering something real. Finally, quietly. What do you want to know? Everything. But we can start small. She settled back in her chair, still holding his hand. Tell me about Mr. Whiskers. And there, on the balcony 47 floors above Manhattan, under stars they could barely see through the city's glow, Matthew Kirk started talking. About the cat who'd saved him. About running away and coming home. About his grandmother's patience. About building walls and forgetting doors existed. Jasmine listened, asked questions, shared her own stories. Foster homes, loneliness, survival. They talked until the whiskey was gone and the city started waking, until the sky lightened from black to gray to the promise of dawn. And when they finally went back inside, walking to their shared bedroom together, Jasmine realized something had fundamentally shifted. They'd stopped being strangers playing house. They were becoming something more dangerous. People who genuinely knew each other. Which meant when this ended, when the contract expired and they went their separate ways, it was going to hurt in ways neither of them had anticipated. But that was a problem for future them. For now, Jasmine climbed into bed beside Matthew, close enough to feel his warmth but not touching, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could figure out how to be less alone together. Even if only for 11 more months. Catherine left on the 7th day with tears in her eyes and joy in her heart. "You've made him happy," she told Jasmine at the elevator, holding both her hands. "I can see it in his eyes. He's finally living instead of just surviving." The guilt nearly choked her. "Catherine." "No, let me finish." The old woman's grip tightened. "Whatever happens, whatever challenges you two face, remember this. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I'll remember." Catherine kissed her cheek, then turned to Matthew, who'd been hovering nearby with barely concealed emotion. "And you. Don't mess this up by being stubborn. That woman loves you. Let her. Grandmother. I mean it, Matthew. Let yourself be loved. You deserve it." She patted his face gently. "Even if you don't believe it yet." When the elevator doors closed, Matthew stood frozen, staring at the space his grandmother had occupied. Jasmine watched tension radiate through his shoulders, saw his jaw working like he was fighting words that wanted escape. "She's right, you know," Jasmine said softly. "About what? You deserve to be loved." She moved to stand beside him. "Even if you spend your whole life convinced you don't." Matthew turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. "The week is over. We don't have to share the bedroom anymore." The words hit like cold water. Of course. The forced proximity was done. They could return to their separate wings, separate lives, careful distance. Except Jasmine didn't want that anymore. "What if I don't want to go back?" The question came out before fear could stop it. His eyes widened slightly. "Jasmine. I'm not asking for anything complicated. I just..." She struggled for words. "The past week, getting to know you, talking until dawn, learning how you take your coffee and what makes you laugh. I don't want to lose that. Do you?" Matthew was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, barely audible, "No." Relief flooded through her. "So we keep going. Keep being honest. Keep actually trying to be friends instead of contractual strangers." "Friends," he repeated, like testing the weight of the word. "Unless you'd prefer business associates who occasionally share a bed?" She tried for lightness despite her hammering heart. A smile tugged at his lips. Genuine, warm, the smile she'd learned to coax out during their late-night conversations. "When you put it that way, friend sounds infinitely better." "Good." She grinned. "Because I already moved all my comfortable pajamas into your bathroom and I'm not moving them back." "Our bathroom," he corrected quietly. The word "our" hung between them, intimate and terrifying. "Our bathroom," Jasmine echoed. "Our bedroom. Our kitchen at midnight when neither of us can sleep. Our life," Matthew added, then seemed to realize what he'd said. "For 11 more months." Right. 11 more months. Then they'd divorce, take their money, and walk away as planned. Except the plan was starting to feel less like freedom and more like loss. The next 2 weeks transformed the penthouse from museum to home. It started small. Jasmine making breakfast, Matthew joining her instead of eating in his office. Shared coffee at the kitchen island, trading sections of the newspaper. Comfortable silence that didn't feel empty. Then bigger. Movie nights where Matthew introduced her to the classic films he pretended not to love. Jasmine teaching him to cook her mother's recipes, the few she remembered. Arguments about politics and philosophy that turned into debates, then discussions, then laughter over how seriously they'd taken themselves. Matthew started working from home more. Jasmine studied for her certification exam at the dining room table instead of hiding in her suite. They orbited each other naturally. drawn together by something neither could quite name. One evening, Jasmine found him in his office, staring at acquisition reports with exhausted eyes. "You've been working for 12 hours straight," she said from the doorway. "Has it been 12? He checked his watch, surprised. "I lost track. Come eat dinner. I made pasta." She leaned against the doorframe. "And before you say you're not hungry, I already plated yours. So you can eat with me, or you can hurt my feelings by letting it get cold while you work yourself into an early grave." He looked up and something in his expression softened. "That's manipulative. That's friendship. We make each other take care of ourselves." She held out her hand. "Come on, Kirk. The spreadsheets will still be there in an hour." Matthew took her hand, let her pull him from his chair. In the kitchen, she'd set 2 places at the island. Casual, intimate, like they did this every night. Which they were starting to. The pasta was simple but good. They ate and talked about nothing important. A documentary she'd watched, a client who'd annoyed him, the neighbor's dog who barked at 6 a.m. every morning. Normal couple things. Except they weren't a normal couple. "Can I ask you something?" Matthew said suddenly. "Always. Why do you do this? Take care of me, I mean. Make me dinner, force me to take breaks, listen to my terrible day." He set down his fork. "It's not in the contract." Jasmine considered lying, deflecting, keeping it light. "But they'd promised honesty. Because somewhere in the past month, I started caring whether you eat, sleep, or work yourself to death." She met his eyes. "Because when you're happy, I'm happy. And when you're struggling, I want to help. That's what friends do. Is that all we are?" The question came out carefully like he was testing ice. Her heart stuttered. "What else would we be?" Matthew stood, moving to the window. His retreat pattern she'd learned. Distance when things got too real. "I don't know. But I know that when I wake up at 3 a.m. now, I'm not afraid. Because you're there, and somehow that makes the nightmares powerless." He turned to face her. "I know that I look forward to coming home, which I never have in my entire adult life. I know that you make me laugh, and I didn't think I remembered how." Jasmine's breath caught. "Matthew, I know the contract says 11 more months. I know we have an end date, an exit strategy, a clean separation plan." His gray eyes held hers with devastating intensity. "But I also know that I don't want you in the guest wing anymore. I don't want separate lives under the same roof. I want—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "I don't know what I want. And that terrifies me." She should reinforce the boundaries. Should remind them both this was temporary, transactional, already scheduled to end. Should protect them both from the heartbreak waiting at the finish line. Instead, she crossed to him, took his hands in hers. "What if we stopped being so afraid? What if we just let this be what it is for however long we have? And what is it? I don't know yet. But I know I'm happier with you than I've been in years. I know that when you smile at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. I know that sharing a bed with you feels safer than sleeping alone ever did." She squeezed his hands. "Maybe we don't need to define it. Maybe we just need to stop fighting it." Matthew's thumb traced circles on her wrist. "Absent, gentle, intimate. I'm not good at this. At letting people in. At being vulnerable without feeling like I'm losing control. You're better at it than you think. You've been vulnerable with me all week." She stepped closer. "And the world didn't end. You didn't become your father. You just became more, you." "More me," he repeated softly. "Is that what you want?" "It's all I want." The truth of it terrified and freed her simultaneously. No performance. No careful management. Just Matthew without the armor. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he raised one hand to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "You're dangerous, Jasmine Kenneth." "Jasmine Kirk," she corrected, surprising herself. "At least for 11 more months." His expression shifted. Something raw and hopeful and scared. "What if I don't want it to end?" The question hung between them like a hand grenade with the pin pulled. "Then we figure it out when we get there," Jasmine whispered. "But for now, let's just be here. Be us. Be whatever this is." Matthew leaned down, slowly enough that she could stop him, clearly enough that she understood the question. This wasn't for cameras or grandmothers or contracts. This was real. She rose to meet him, and when their lips touched, it was nothing like their courthouse kiss. This was soft and searching, tentative and true. His hand slid into her hair, her fingers gripped his shirt, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just this. Two broken people choosing connection over safety. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be someone's person." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." She smiled. "That's kind of our thing now. Figuring things out together." He kissed her again. Briefer, sweeter. "I should warn you. I'm probably going to mess this up. Push you away when I'm scared. Retreat into work. Forget how to use my words. And I'm probably going to be stubborn, push too hard, demand honesty when you're not ready to give it." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "We're both disasters, Matthew. But maybe we're disasters who make each other better." "Maybe," he agreed. Then, with a tentative smile that transformed his entire face, "Want to watch a movie? I promise not to work for at least 2 hours." 2 whole hours. Such commitment. She laughed, threading her fingers through his. "What are we watching?" "Casablanca. It's..." He paused, looking almost shy. "It's my favorite. I've never told anyone that." The gift of that confession wasn't lost on her. "Then Casablanca it is." They settled on the couch, not at opposite ends like strangers, but close, her feet tucked under her, his arm along the back cushions where her shoulders would rest if she leaned back. Halfway through the movie she did lean back, and his arm came around her naturally, like they'd done this 1,000 times. "This okay?" he murmured. "Perfect." They stayed like that through the whole film, trading commentary and favorite lines, her head on his shoulder, his fingers absently playing with her hair. When the credits rolled, neither moved to turn it off. "Thank you," Matthew said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For pushing past my walls. For making me want to try." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "For making this place feel like home." Jasmine turned to look up at him, seeing everything he wasn't saying written in his eyes. "Thank you for letting me in." They sat in the blue glow of the TV, the city sparkling beyond the windows, and Jasmine felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't part of the plan. Wasn't in the contract. Wasn't supposed to happen. But somewhere between signatures and grandmother visits and 3 a.m. confessions, she'd fallen in love with Matthew Kirk. And based on the way he was looking at her, tender and terrified and trying, he'd fallen too. Which meant the ending they'd so carefully planned was about to become unbearable. But that was a problem for later. For now she had this, Matthew's arms, his heartbeat steady under her ear, the rare gift of his trust. For now that was enough. The next morning, Jasmine woke to find Matthew already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How long have you been staring at me, creep?" she asked, voice sleep rough. "Long enough to confirm you drool when you sleep." His lips twitched. "And snore. Lightly but definitely snore." "I do not." She swatted his chest. "Take it back." "Never. I have evidence." He caught her hand, holding it against his heart. "Good morning, by the way." "Good morning." She studied him, relaxed, unguarded, almost happy. "You're in a good mood." "I slept through the night. No nightmares. First time in." He trailed off doing math. "Months. Maybe years. Must be my snoring. Scared the nightmares away. Must be." But his eyes said something else. "Must be you." They lay there in comfortable silence, morning light painting the room gold, and Jasmine realized this was what people meant when they talked about intimacy. Not sex or grand gestures, but this. Being seen at your worst, drooling, snoring, hair a mess, and being cherished anyway. "What are you thinking?" Matthew asked. That I like this. Us. Whatever we're becoming. She traced patterns on his chest. That scares me. Me too. He caught her hand, stilling it. But I'm trying not to run from scary things anymore. How's that going? Terrifying. Liberating. Mostly terrifying. He pulled her closer. But worth it. You're worth it. The words settled into her heart like seeds. Matthew Kirk, was that a feelings declaration? Maybe. Don't let it go to your head. But he was smiling, real and warm, and Jasmine wanted to bottle this moment. His smile, his arms, the safety of being known. Too late. Already went to my head. I'm impossible now. You were already impossible. And yet you like me anyway. Unfortunately. He kissed her forehead. What's your plan for today? Study for my certification exam. It's in 3 weeks. She'd been putting off thinking about it, about what passing the exam meant. Independence. Career. The ability to support herself without his money. The ability to leave if she wanted. You'll ace it, Matthew said with certainty. You're brilliant. You barely know what I'm studying. Medical billing and coding. You've been reading those textbooks every night while I pretend to work but actually just watch you concentrate. He tucked hair behind her ear. You get this little crease between your eyebrows when you're memorizing terminology. It's adorable. Warmth flooded her chest. You notice that? I notice everything about you. The admission came out soft, almost vulnerable. The way you hum when you cook. How you take your coffee with too much sugar. That you arrange books by color instead of author, which is chaos and drives me insane, but I'm learning to accept it. Matthew Kirk, accepting chaos. Character growth. She grinned. What's next? Spontaneity. Let's not get crazy. They laughed and Jasmine thought. This is what I want. Every morning, every laugh, every moment of being known and choosing each other anyway. But the contract said 11 more months. And neither of them was brave enough yet to talk about what happened after. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something was temporary, but your heart got involved anyway? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts below. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones we don't see coming. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 months into their marriage. Jasmine was in the kitchen making breakfast when Matthew's phone rang. She saw his face change as he looked at the screen. Saw the walls slam back up with devastating speed. I need to take this. He disappeared into his office without explanation. She stood there, spatula in hand, eggs cooling on the stove, and felt the first tremor of unease. 20 minutes later, he emerged. His expression was carefully blank, the businessman face she hadn't seen in weeks. What's wrong? Jasmine set down the spatula. Nothing's wrong. Business complication. He poured coffee with mechanical precision. I need to handle something today. I'll be out most of the afternoon. Matthew. It's fine, Jasmine. Just work. But he wouldn't meet her eyes. He left 30 minutes later without kissing her goodbye, without the casual touches they developed, without any of the warmth that had become their new normal. Jasmine stood in the suddenly empty penthouse and felt dread pool in her stomach. Something had changed. Something was wrong. She tried to focus on studying, but her mind kept circling back to Matthew's expression, the way he'd shut down, the careful distance he'd rebuilt in minutes. At 3 p.m., her phone buzzed. Rebecca. Can you come to the office? Conference room B. It's important. The dread intensified. Jasmine arrived at Kirk Industries 40 minutes later, dressed in her best approximation of boardroom appropriate, feeling distinctly out of place among the glass and steel and people who belonged in this world. Rebecca met her at the elevator, expression professionally neutral but eyes concerned. He's in the conference room. With his lawyer and, she paused, someone else. Who? You should let Matthew explain. Nothing about this was good. The conference room was the same one where she'd signed the contract 2 months ago. Matthew stood at the window, rigid with tension. His lawyer, the silver-haired man from the courthouse, sat at the table reviewing documents. and beside him sat a woman Jasmine didn't recognize. 50s, expensive suit, calculating eyes. Mrs. Kirk. The woman stood extending a hand. Diana Rothschild. I represent Whitmore Holdings, your husband's primary competitor for control of Kirk Industries. Jasmine shook her hand automatically, mind racing. I don't understand. Sit down, Jasmine. Matthew's voice was flat, emotionless. Not the man who'd held her this morning. The stranger she'd married in a courthouse. She sat. What's going on? Diana smiled, sharp, predatory. I'll be direct. I have evidence that your marriage to Matthew Kirk is fraudulent. A contract arrangement designed to circumvent inheritance requirements. I'm prepared to present this evidence to the board unless certain conditions are met. The words hit like physical blows. Jasmine's vision tunneled. How? How did I find out? Diana's smile widened. I've had investigators following Matthew for months. They documented your separate living arrangements initially, your courthouse wedding with no guests, the timing coinciding perfectly with the inheritance deadline. She slid a folder across the table. I have photos, testimony from your former landlord about the sudden move, financial records showing the $2 million payout clause. Jasmine felt sick. You can't. I can and will, unless Matthew agrees to step down as CEO and relinquish his controlling shares to Whitmore Holdings. Diana leaned back, victorious. I'll give you 72 hours to decide. Resign quietly or I expose everything. The board will invalidate the inheritance. The media will crucify you both. And your grandmother. She looked at Matthew. Well, Catherine's heart couldn't take that kind of scandal, could it? Matthew's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Get out. His lawyer stood. This conversation is over. 72 hours, Matthew. Diana gathered her things. Think carefully. Your company or your reputation. Your grandmother's health or your pride. She paused at the door. Oh, and Mrs. Kirk? That $2 million. You might want to consult your own lawyer about fraud charges. When she left, silence crashed through the room like broken glass. Matthew. Jasmine's voice shook. Say something. We need to discuss options. His lawyer pulled out more documents. We can fight this. The marriage is legal regardless of motivation. But it'll be ugly. Public. Expensive. And my grandmother? Matthew's voice was hollow. The stress could be considerable, given her age and health. Matthew closed his eyes. Then we don't fight. What? Jasmine stood. You're just going to give her everything? Give up the company you built. What choice do I have? Finally, he looked at her, and the devastation in his gray eyes stole her breath. If we fight, it comes out. Everything. The contract. The lies. Catherine finds out I manipulated some woman into a fake marriage just to secure money. That destroys her. Some woman. The words came out sharp. Is that what I am to you? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Jasmine felt something cracking in her chest. Because it sounds like you're reducing everything we've been building to a transaction again. It was always a transaction, Jasmine. We signed a contract. We both knew. Don't you dare. Anger flooded through her, hot and clarifying. Don't you dare pretend the last month didn't happen. The conversations, the vulnerability, She stopped, suddenly aware of the lawyer watching. You know what this was. What it became. Matthew's expression hardened. What it became was complicated. Messy. Exactly what I was trying to avoid. So that's it. Someone threatens you and you just shut down? Shut me out? Go back to being the closed-off robot who treats people like assets. I'm trying to protect you. His voice rose for the first time. Do you understand what Diana can do? She'll destroy you. Fraud charges. Public humiliation. Your name in every tabloid as the gold digger who seduced a billionaire for money. I don't care about the tabloids. Well, you should. He slammed his hand on the table. Because I care. I care that you'll be crucified for something I dragged you into. I care that your foster sister will see headlines calling you a con artist. I care that—" He stopped abruptly. "That what?" "That I've ruined you." The words came out broken. "I've taken someone good and honest and dragged her into my mess. Made her a liar. Made her complicit in deception. And now she's going to pay the price for my mistakes." Jasmine stared at him, understanding dawning with sickening clarity. "This isn't about protecting me. This is about your guilt. About confirming what you've always believed, that you destroy everything you touch. Don't psychoanalyze me. Someone needs to." She moved closer, desperate to reach him through the walls he was rebuilding. "Matthew, you're doing exactly what you always do. Something gets hard, something gets real, and you run. You shut down. You push away anyone who might actually matter. This isn't running. This is damage control. This is cowardice." The word hung between them, harsh and true. "You're so terrified of becoming your father that you can't see you're doing something worse. You're abandoning the people who love you before they can abandon you first." Matthew's face went pale. "Don't. Why not? Someone needs to say it." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Your mother left because she had to survive. I'm not leaving. I'm standing right here, telling you we can fight this together. But you won't let me because you're convinced you're not worth fighting for. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice cracked despite her efforts. "I understand that I was stupid enough to fall in love with you. That I thought maybe we'd both finally found someone who understood our damage. But you know what the real damage is? Not your father. Not your childhood. It's the fact that you can't believe anyone would choose you without a contract forcing them to stay." The silence that followed was devastating. Matthew stood frozen, his expression a war between vulnerability and defense. Finally, quietly, "You don't love me. You love the fantasy of being saved. The security. The life I provided." The words landed like bullets. "How dare you?" Jasmine's voice was ice over fire. "How dare you reduce what I feel to some kind of transaction? I had security. I had the money. I could have moved to the guest wing and waited out the contract in comfort." She stepped closer, making him see her. "But I chose to stay in your bed. Chose to learn your nightmares. Chose to care whether you ate or slept or worked yourself to death. That wasn't in the contract, Matthew. That was real. Nothing about this is real." But his voice wavered. "It was built on lies from the beginning. The beginning was lies. What it became was truth." She held his gaze. "But you can't see that because you're so convinced you're unlovable that you'd rather blow this up than risk believing someone might actually want you. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need your partnership. Your trust. Your willingness to fight with me instead of pushing me away the second things get hard." Tears finally escaped, tracking hot down her face. "But if you can't give me that, if you're going to spend the rest of this marriage waiting for me to leave, then maybe Diana's right. Maybe this whole thing was just a very expensive mistake." Matthew flinched like she'd struck him. Maybe it was. The confirmation shattered something in Jasmine's chest. "Fine. Then let me make this easy for you." She pulled off the wedding ring she'd started wearing in the last month. Not the simple courthouse band, but the engagement ring Matthew had given her 2 weeks ago, a surprise gift after a particularly perfect evening. "You want me gone? I'm gone." "Jasmine." "No." She set the ring on the table between them, each movement precise despite her shaking hands. "You've made yourself very clear. This was a transaction that got complicated. You want uncomplicated? You've got it." She turned to the lawyer. "I assume there's an early termination clause?" "Yes, but—" "Execute it. I'll sign whatever needs signing. I'll take nothing beyond what I'm legally obligated to receive. And I'll be out of the penthouse by tonight." She looked at Matthew one last time, memorizing his devastated expression. "Congratulations, Matthew Kirk. You've successfully pushed away the one person who loved you enough to stay. Just like you always knew you would. She walked out before he could respond, before she could take it back, before the tears became sobs. Rebecca caught her in the hallway. Jasmine, wait. Don't. Jasmine kept walking toward the elevator. Don't tell me he didn't mean it. Don't tell me to give him time. Don't tell me anything except how fast I can get out of this legally. He loves you. Rebecca's voice was soft, certain. He's terrified and self-destructive, but he loves you. Then he should have said that. Not whatever the hell that was. The elevator doors opened. Send me the paperwork. I'll sign it tonight. She made it to the street before the sobs came. Made it to a coffee shop bathroom before she completely broke down. Sat on the floor, expensive coat, borrowed designer purse, mascara ruining her face, and grieved for something that had never been quite real but had felt more real than anything else in her life. She'd been right about one thing. Falling in love with Matthew Kirk had been the most dangerous development in their arrangement. She just hadn't realized how much it would destroy her when it ended. Back in the conference room, Matthew stood frozen, staring at the ring Jasmine had left behind. That went well, his lawyer said dryly. Shut up, David. She's right, you know. David gathered his documents. About all of it. You're self-destructing because you're terrified. And you just pushed away the best thing that's happened to you since your grandmother took you in. I don't need your commentary on my personal life. Apparently you do, because you're making catastrophically stupid decisions. David paused at the door. Diana gave you 72 hours. I suggest you spend that time figuring out what you're actually afraid of. Losing the company, or losing the woman who loves you despite your very best efforts to be unlovable. When he left, Matthew was alone with the ring and the wreckage of what he'd just destroyed. He picked up the ring, felt its weight, remembered sliding it onto Jasmine's finger 2 weeks ago. She'd cried, happy tears, and told him it was too much, too beautiful, too everything. He'd told her nothing was too much for her. He'd meant it then. And he'd just thrown it all away because Diana Rothschild had touched every fear he'd ever carried. Exposure. Humiliation. Confirmation that he was his father's son. Destroying the people who got close to him. His phone buzzed. Catherine. How's my favorite granddaughter-in-law? Tell Jasmine I'm thinking of her. The text felt like a knife between his ribs. If he stepped down, gave Diana what she wanted, the marriage could end quietly. Jasmine could walk away with her money and her dignity. Catherine would never know the truth. Everyone would be protected. Except Jasmine would be gone. And Matthew would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd had something real, something precious, and he'd destroyed it with his own hands. Just like his father had destroyed his mother. Just like he'd always feared he would. The ring caught light from the windows, throwing rainbow prisms across the table. Beautiful and cold and infinitely distant. Like everything Matthew had ever wanted. Like everything he was too broken to keep. That night, Jasmine packed her belongings with mechanical precision. She'd called Desiree, who'd offered her couch without questions. She'd texted Rebecca about the paperwork. She'd compartmentalized everything she felt into a box she'd open later, when she was alone and safe and far from the penthouse that had become home. She was almost done when she heard the front door open. Matthew's footsteps. Hesitant. Stopping outside the bedroom, their bedroom, where she'd been living for the past month. Jasmine. His voice was rough, wrecked. Can we talk? We talked. You made your position clear. She continued folding clothes, not looking at him. I was wrong. Yes. You were. She finally turned to face him. He looked terrible. Tie loosened, hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. But that doesn't change anything. It changes everything. He took a step into the room. I was terrified. I saw Diana's evidence and all I could think was that I'd dragged you into something that would destroy you. That I'd proven I was exactly what I always feared, someone who hurts the people he stopped. The people he what? The people he loves. The words came out broken. I love you, Jasmine. I'm terrified and I'm terrible at it and I spent all day convinced I should let you go for your own good. But then I realized something. What? That letting you go isn't protecting you. It's protecting me. From having to risk being loved. From having to believe I'm worth fighting for. He moved closer. You were right about everything. I pushed you away because I'm a coward. Because the second things got real, I reverted to the scared 8-year-old who thinks everyone leaves eventually. Jasmine felt her resolve cracking. Matthew. I don't want to give Diana what she wants. I don't want to step down. But more than that. He held her gaze. I don't want to lose you. So if fighting means public scandal and Diana exposing everything, then we fight. Together. Like you said. And your grandmother? Pain flashed across his face. I'll tell her the truth. Before Diana can. I'll explain everything. The contract, the arrangement, how it started. And I'll tell her what it became. He took her hand. I'll tell her I fell in love with my contractual wife, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I was too stupid to see it until I'd already pushed her away. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes. You can't just say perfect things and expect. I know. I know I destroyed something and words aren't enough to rebuild it. His thumb traced her knuckles. But I'm asking for a chance. Not 11 more months of a contract. A real chance. At us. At whatever this becomes when it's not bound by exit clauses and transaction terms. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to tear up the contract. I want you to stay not because you're legally obligated, but because you choose to. And I want to choose you back. Every day. Messy, complicated, terrifying. All of it. He pulled something from his pocket. The ring she'd left behind. I gave you this 2 weeks ago. I told you it wasn't part of the contract. That I wanted you to have it because I was trying to say what I couldn't put into words. Which was that somewhere between courthouse and grandmother visits and 3 a.m. nightmares, I fell completely in love with you. He held out the ring. Stay. Not as my contracted wife. As my partner. My person. The woman I want beside me when we fight Diana, when we tell Catherine, when we figure out what the hell we're doing with our lives. Jasmine stared at the ring, at Matthew's desperate expression, at the future he was offering. Uncertain, risky, real. And if we crash and burn? She asked quietly. If this thing between us doesn't survive the scandal? Then we crash and burn together. But at least we'll have tried. He stepped closer. I spent my whole life playing it safe, Jasmine. Building walls. Controlling every variable. And I was miserable. Then you bulldozed into my carefully managed existence and made me feel things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. Made me want things I thought I didn't deserve. His voice cracked. Don't let my fear destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. Please. She should make him work for it. Should protect herself. Should remember how badly he'd hurt her just hours ago. But she'd spent her whole life protecting herself, and it had left her just as lonely as Matthew's control had left him. Maybe it was time they both tried something different. If I stay, she said carefully, things change. No more running when you're scared. No more shutting me out when things get hard. We're partners, Matthew. Which means you don't get to make unilateral decisions about what's best for me. Deal. And you have to actually say the words. Regularly. None of this strong silent type nonsense where I'm supposed to just know how you feel. I love you. He said it clearly, certainly. I love you, Jasmine Kenneth Kirk. I love how you push my boundaries. I love how you make me laugh. I love that you see my damage and don't run. I love. She kissed him, cutting off the words, pouring everything she felt into it. The fear, the anger, the love, the hope. He kissed her back desperately, hands framing her face like she was precious, breakable, essential. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. Does this mean you're staying? I'm staying. She took the ring from him, slid it back on her finger where it belonged. But Matthew, if you ever pull something like this again, if you ever try to push me away, for my own good, I will actually leave. And I won't come back. Understood. He kissed her again, softer. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. Even when I gave you every reason to. He pulled her close, holding her like he'd almost lost her. Which he had. What do we do now? Now. Jasmine pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Now we call your grandmother and tell her the truth. Then we get a better lawyer than David. Then we figure out how to destroy Diana Rothschild's case so thoroughly she regrets ever threatening us. You're terrifying when you're determined. You have no idea. She smiled, fierce and certain. But you're about to find out. Because no one threatens my husband and gets away with it. Contract or no contract. Matthew laughed. Real, genuine, free. I really do love you. I know. She kissed him once more. Now let's go save your company and figure out how to be an actual married couple instead of contractual strangers pretending. Think we can manage that? We've managed everything else. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. Besides, we've got something Diana doesn't. What's that? The truth. And two stubborn people who are finally done running from it. Together, they walked out of the bedroom. No longer separate wings, no longer careful distance, but truly together for the first time since they'd signed that contract in a conference room 2 months ago. The fight ahead would be brutal. Diana wouldn't go down easy. Catherine's reaction was uncertain. The media would devour them. But for the first time, Matthew Kirk and Jasmine Kenneth weren't facing it alone. They were facing it together. And that made all the difference. Catherine Whitmore arrived at the penthouse at 10 a.m. the next morning, summoned by Matthew's cryptic, "We need to talk about something important." Jasmine watched her walk in, elegant, sharp-eyed, already sensing something was wrong, and felt her stomach knot with anxiety. "This is ominous," Catherine said, settling into the living room chair like a queen preparing for court. "The last time you called me with that tone, you were 12 and had accidentally set fire to my rose garden." "That was a science experiment gone wrong," Matthew said, sitting beside Jasmine on the couch. Their hands were joined, both drawing strength from the contact. "And this." Catherine's gaze moved between them, missing nothing. "What kind of experiment has gone wrong now?" Matthew took a breath. Jasmine felt his hand tighten on hers. "Grandmother, there's something I need to tell you. About how Jasmine and I met. About why we married so quickly." He paused, visibly gathering courage. "About the contract." Catherine's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Go on." For the next 20 minutes, Matthew laid it all out. Grandfather's inheritance clause, the desperation that led him to propose a business arrangement, finding Jasmine, the courthouse wedding, the separate wings. He was honest about everything. The transaction, the terms, the $2 million. Jasmine watched Catherine's face, trying to gauge her reaction, but the old woman had perfected inscrutability over 87 years. When Matthew finished, silence filled the room like smoke. Finally, Catherine spoke. "So when I visited, when I saw you two together, when I thought my grandson had finally found love, that was all performance?" "No." Jasmine leaned forward, unable to stay quiet. "That's the thing. It started as performance. But somewhere between signing the contract and your visit, it became real. We became real." "How convenient." Catherine's voice was ice. "The poor girl falls in love with the billionaire right around the time $2 million is about to exchange hands." The words hit like a slap. Jasmine felt Matthew tense beside her, ready to defend her, but she squeezed his hand, a silent request to let her handle this. "You're right to be suspicious," Jasmine said quietly. "If someone told me this story, I'd think the same thing. Gold digger sees an opportunity, plays the long game, secures the payout." She met Catherine's sharp gaze directly. "But I didn't fall in love with Matthew because of his money. I fell in love with him despite knowing it would make everything more complicated. Despite knowing it wasn't in the contract. Despite knowing it would hurt more when it ended. And yet here you are. Still in the penthouse. Still wearing the ring. Because yesterday, when everything fell apart and I walked away, Matthew came after me." Jasmine's voice strengthened. "Not with money. Not with contract clauses. but with honesty, with vulnerability, with the admission that he'd fallen in love with me too, and he was willing to risk everything. His company, his reputation, the scandal, to keep me. Catherine turned to Matthew. Is this true? Every word. Matthew's voice was steady. I know I've disappointed you. I know this isn't what you hoped for when you thought I'd finally found someone. But grandmother, I need you to understand. I didn't know how to find love. I didn't think I deserved it. So I tried to engineer it like everything else in my life. And instead, I found something real by accident. By accident, Catherine repeated slowly. You accidentally fell in love with the woman you contracted to marry. I know how it sounds. Do you? She stood abruptly, pacing to the windows. Do you know how it sounds to learn my grandson, the boy I raised, the man I trusted, manipulated some young woman into a fake marriage? Do you know what it says about the values I tried to instill? I know. Matthew stood too, facing her. I know I made a terrible choice. I know I treated marriage like a business deal. I know I disappointed you in ways I can't take back. He paused, and Jasmine heard the tremor in his voice. But I also know that Jasmine is the best thing that's happened to me since you took me out of my father's house. She makes me want to be better, braver, more human. And I'm asking you, begging you, to give us a chance to prove this is real. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, studying the city beyond the glass. When she turned back, her eyes were wet. I knew, she said softly. Matthew froze. What? I knew the marriage was arranged. Probably not the specific terms, but I knew it wasn't a love match when it started. She moved closer, cupping his face with surprising gentleness. Matthew, I've known you for 25 years. I know when you're hiding something. I know your patterns, your fears, your terrible habit of trying to control everything. Then why? Why did I come visit? Why did I act like I believed the fairy tale? She smiled sadly. Because I hoped that by treating it as real, it might become real. Because I saw how you looked at her when you thought I wasn't watching. Because I saw her look at you the same way. She turned to Jasmine. And because this young woman defended you with such fierce loyalty, such genuine care, that I thought maybe, just maybe, my stubborn grandson had stumbled into something true despite his best efforts to keep his heart locked away. Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes. You knew the whole time? Not the whole time. But yes, I suspected. Catherine sat back down, suddenly looking every one of her 87 years. What I didn't know was that there'd be consequences. That someone would use this against you. Matthew knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I'm sorry, grandmother. For lying. For manipulating the inheritance. For putting you in this position. I'm not angry about the inheritance, foolish boy. I'm angry that you thought you had to buy someone to love you. She touched his face gently. Your grandfather wrote that clause hoping you'd find connection, not transaction. He wanted you to have what we had, messy, imperfect, real. I didn't know how to find that. So you bought it. Very you. She shook her head, but there was fondness in her exasperation. Now, tell me about this Diana person and what exactly she's threatening. They spent the next hour strategizing. Catherine, it turned out, had not built a fortune and survived 87 years by being delicate. She listened to Diana's threats with the focus of a general planning war, asked sharp questions, and immediately identified weaknesses in the opposition's position. She's counting on you being too ashamed to fight, Catherine said. She thinks Matthew will choose protecting his reputation over protecting his company. Classic intimidation tactic. She looked at Jasmine. But she didn't account for you. Me. You're the wild card. Diana researched a transaction. She found a marriage of convenience. But what she didn't find was a woman who'd fight like hell for the man she loves. Catherine smiled slightly. That changes everything. How? Matthew asked. Because her entire case is built on the marriage being fake. But if you two stand together, if you're willing to go public with the truth. Yes, it started as a contract, but it became real. You control the narrative. She leaned forward. Diana wants a scandal. Give her a love story instead. Jasmine and Matthew exchanged glances. You want us to go public? Jasmine said slowly. Tell everyone it started as an arrangement. I want you to tell everyone it started as a survival strategy for two broken people who accidentally healed each other. Catherine's voice was firm. Diana's counting on shame. Remove the shame, remove her power. The board will still, Matthew started. The board cares about stability and profit. If you present this correctly, two people who found unexpected love, who are committed to each other and the company, they'll see a human interest story, not a scandal. Catherine stood. But it requires something you've never been good at, Matthew. Vulnerability. Public vulnerability. Can you do that? Matthew looked at Jasmine. Can we do that? She thought about it. Standing in front of cameras, admitting the truth, letting the world see their damage and their healing. It was terrifying. Exposing. Everything she'd spent her life avoiding. But it was also honest. Real. The opposite of hiding. Yes, she said firmly. We can do that. Good. Catherine pulled out her phone. Because I'm calling my lawyer, my PR team, and my contact at the Times. We have 72 hours to turn Diana's attack into our victory. Let's get to work. The next 48 hours were a blur of lawyers, PR consultants, and strategy sessions. They crafted their story carefully. Matthew Kirk, damaged by his childhood, sought a business arrangement to secure his inheritance. Jasmine Kenneth, survivor of foster care, needed financial security. They married with clear terms and no expectations. But proximity bred connection. Honesty bred intimacy. Two people convinced they were unlovable discovered they were exactly what the other needed. It's not scandal, their PR consultant said, reviewing the talking points. It's romance. Modern, messy, but ultimately hopeful. The media will eat it up. And the board? Matthew asked. Frame it as commitment. You didn't just marry to check a box. You found a partner who makes you better, more stable, more human. That's exactly what they want in a CEO. She paused. But Matthew, this only works if it's genuine. The interview, the public statements, they can't feel rehearsed. You have to actually be in love. Matthew looked at Jasmine. That won't be a problem. The night before their planned press conference, they sat on the balcony where they'd had their first honest conversation months ago. The city glittered below, indifferent to their drama. Are you scared? Jasmine asked. Terrified. Matthew took her hand. I've spent my entire adult life keeping my private life private. And tomorrow we're going to invite the world to dissect our relationship. We don't have to do this. We could take Diana's deal, let you step down. No. His voice was firm. I'm done running. Done hiding. Done protecting myself at the expense of everything real. He turned to face her fully. Tomorrow, I'm going to stand in front of cameras and tell the world I fell in love with my contract wife. I'm going to admit I was an emotionally stunted disaster who tried to buy connection. I'm going to be vulnerable in ways that would have destroyed me 6 months ago. Why? Because you're worth it. Because this, he gestured between them, is worth it. Because I'd rather risk everything being honest with you than keep everything by hiding who I am. Jasmine felt tears well. That's very grown-up of you, Kirk. I'm trying. He smiled slightly. You're a terrible influence. Making me have feelings and express them. Awful. You should get a refund on this wife. Never. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. You're stuck with me now. Contract or no contract. Actually, Jasmine pulled back, suddenly serious. About the contract. I want to tear it up. Matthew froze. What? Not end it. Tear it up. Literally destroy it. She held his gaze. I don't want there to be terms anymore. No exit clauses. No $2 million payout. No 12-month expiration. I want us to just be married. For real. For as long as we both choose this. Jasmine, that money is yours. You earned it. I didn't earn it. I survived it. There's a difference. She squeezed his hand. And I don't want our relationship to have a price tag. I don't want you to ever wonder if I stayed for the money. I want to stay because I choose you. Every day. Just you. Matthew's eyes were suspiciously bright. That's the most romantic and financially irresponsible thing anyone's ever said to me. Good thing you're rich enough for both of us. She smiled. So, do we tear up the contract? We tear up the contract. He kissed her. Deep, certain, real. Starting over. No terms. Just us. Just us, she echoed. Although I do have one condition. Name it. When this is over, after we deal with Diana, after the media circus, after everything settles, I want to have a real wedding. Not a courthouse with lawyers. A real ceremony with your grandmother and Desiree and people who actually care about us. You want to marry me again? I want to marry you for real this time. With vows we mean and promises we intend to keep. She touched his face gently. I want to stand in front of everyone and choose you when there's no contract forcing it. When it's just love. Matthew pulled her into his lap, holding her close. Yes. God, yes. Whatever you want. 20 weddings if that's what it takes. One's enough. As long as you're the groom. They stayed like that, tangled together, planning a future that looked nothing like the contract they'd signed but everything like the life they wanted. Tomorrow would bring cameras and questions and public vulnerability. But tonight, they had this, each other, honesty, and the choice to keep choosing each other. No contracts necessary. The press conference happened at Kirk Industries, in the same lobby where Jasmine had once served coffee to people who never saw her. Now she stood beside Matthew, wearing a simple blue dress, holding his hand, facing a room full of cameras and reporters who'd come to watch a scandal unfold. Matthew approached the microphone, and Jasmine felt him trembling slightly. She squeezed his hand. I'm here. We've got this. Thank you all for coming, Matthew began, voice steady despite the tremors she could feel. I'm here to address rumors about my marriage and to tell you the truth about how my wife and I met. He told their story, the whole story. The inheritance clause. His desperation. The contract. Jasmine's need for security. The courthouse wedding. All of it. The reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing, the feeding frenzy beginning. Then Matthew said, and that's where most stories would end. Billionaire finds loophole, woman gets paid, everyone walks away with what they wanted. But that's not what happened. He turned to look at Jasmine, and his expression was so open, so vulnerable, she almost forgot they had an audience. What happened was I started learning who she was. Her strength. Her humor. Her refusal to let me hide behind money and control. What happened was she saw my damage. The childhood trauma, the fear of connection, the absolute certainty I'd destroy anything I loved, and she didn't run. She stayed. She pushed. She made me want to be brave enough to try. He looked back at the cameras. So yes, my marriage started as a business arrangement. But it became the most real thing in my life. Jasmine Kenneth is my partner, my best friend, and the person I want beside me for every success and failure ahead. Not because a contract says so, but because I choose her. Every day. In ways that have nothing to do with inheritance or money or obligation. He paused, and Jasmine saw him take a breath, preparing for the hardest part. I know some of you will see this as scandal. A marriage born of manipulation, now dressed up with pretty words about love. I can't control what you think. But I can tell you this. I spent 33 years certain I was unlovable. Certain that connection meant control and love meant destruction. And then this remarkable woman agreed to marry a stranger for money, and accidentally taught me I was wrong about everything. Jasmine felt tears tracking down her face as Matthew continued. So to those questioning our marriage, yes, it's unconventional. Yes, it started for the wrong reasons. But if you're lucky, you'll find someone who sees your worst self and loves you anyway. Someone who makes you want to be better not because you're trying to impress them, but because they make you believe you can be. That's what Jasmine did for me. That's what she continues to do every day. He turned to her fully, ignoring the cameras now. I love you, Jasmine Kenneth Kirk. I loved you when it was inconvenient, I love you now when it's complicated. And I'll love you when this circus ends and we're just two people building a life together." The room erupted with questions, but Matthew ignored them all, pulling Jasmine into his arms and kissing her in front of every camera in Manhattan. When they pulled apart, she was crying and laughing simultaneously. That was quite a speech. Too much. Perfect. She kissed him again, brief and sweet. Now let's go face the questions and watch Diana Rothschild's case crumble. They fielded questions for 40 minutes. Jasmine talked about foster care, survival, the decision to accept Matthew's proposal. Matthew talked about emotional unavailability, learning to be vulnerable, choosing love over control. They were honest about everything: the separate wings initially, the forced proximity during Catherine's visit, the moment they realized it had become real. "Will you stay married?" one reporter asked. "Absolutely," Jasmine answered without hesitation. "We're actually planning a second wedding. A real one this time, with people we love present." "So the contract is void?" Matthew smiled. "We tore it up. No exit clauses. No expiration date. Just two people committed to figuring this out together." When it was over, they left through a side exit where Rebecca had a car waiting. Catherine was already inside, grinning like a cat who'd gotten into the cream. "That," she said, "was beautiful. Honest, vulnerable, and absolutely devastating to Diana's case. Well done." "Did it work?" Matthew asked. "Will the board—" "The board," Catherine interrupted, checking her phone, "has already released a statement supporting you. Congratulations on your inspiring love story and commitment to transparency. You're staying as CEO." Jasmine felt Matthew sag with relief beside her. "And Diana withdrew her threat approximately 15 minutes ago. Apparently public opinion shifted so fast in your favor that pursuing this became career suicide for her." Catherine's smile was sharp. "Never underestimate the power of honesty, children. Diana played the shame card. You played the truth. Truth won." Matthew pulled Jasmine close, pressing his face into her hair. "We did it. We did it," she agreed. Then, to Catherine, "Thank you for believing in us even when we didn't believe in ourselves." "That's what family does, dear." Catherine patted her hand. "Now, shall we go celebrate? I'm thinking champagne and that Italian restaurant Matthew pretends not to love." As they drove through Manhattan, together, triumphant, free, Jasmine realized something. They'd won more than Matthew's company. They'd won the right to their own story. The freedom to build something real on a foundation that had started false. And most importantly, they'd won each other. Everything else was just details. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Jasmine stood in front of a mirror in Catherine's garden house, adjusting her dress for the third time. Not the borrowed blazer from a courthouse. Not designer labels bought with someone else's money. This dress was hers, simple, elegant, cream-colored silk that moved like water. She'd chosen it herself, paid for it with money from her new job as a medical billing supervisor at Mount Sinai Hospital. Her own money. Her own choice. Her own life. "You look beautiful," Desiree said from behind her, eyes bright and clear. 8 months sober now, working as a counselor at the rehab facility that had saved her life twice. Like an actual bride instead of someone signing corporate paperwork. Jasmine laughed, though her hands trembled slightly. "I'm more nervous now than I was at the courthouse." "Because this one matters." Desiree adjusted the simple flower crown in Jasmine's hair. The first wedding was survival. This one's choice. Choice. The word that had come to define everything about the past 6 months. After the press conference, after Diana's retreat, after the board's support, Jasmine and Matthew had done something radical. They'd actually built a life together. No contract dictating terms. No separate wings. No careful management of expectations. Just two people learning how to be married for real. It hadn't been perfect. Matthew still retreated when overwhelmed, still defaulted to control when scared. Jasmine still pushed too hard sometimes, still struggled with trusting that this wouldn't disappear. But they'd learned to talk through it, to fight fair, to apologize and mean it, to choose each other even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Matthew had started therapy, real therapy, not just emergency sessions when nightmares got bad. He talked about his father, his mother, the violence that had shaped his understanding of love. He was learning that vulnerability wasn't weakness and that needing someone didn't make you your father. Jasmine had passed her certification exam with flying colors, gotten the job at Mount Sinai, started building a career that was hers. She'd learned that accepting help wasn't the same as being dependent. That Matthew supporting her dreams didn't make her less independent. It made them partners. They'd moved into a smaller apartment, still nice, but not the sterile penthouse museum. A place they'd chosen together, decorated together, made into home together. Matthew had even tolerated her organizing books by color, though he still muttered about chaos every time he looked at the shelves. And through it all, they'd planned this, a real wedding. Small, intimate, people who actually mattered. 5 minutes, Rebecca called through the door. She'd become a friend over the past months, not just Matthew's assistant, but someone who'd guided them both through the aftermath of going public, who'd celebrated their victories and talked them through their fights. Jasmine took a deep breath, checked her reflection one last time. This was it. The moment they'd promised each other on that balcony 6 months ago. The chance to marry each other for real, with no contracts, no obligations, no exit strategies. Just love. Ready? Desiree asked. So ready. Catherine's garden was perfect in late spring, roses in full bloom, the scent of jasmine, Matthew's choice, an inside joke between them. Perfuming the air, white chairs arranged in a semicircle for their 30 guests. Matthew stood at the front with the officiant, and when Jasmine appeared at the garden entrance, his expression transformed into pure joy. This was different from the courthouse. That Matthew had been guarded, performing, managing a transaction. This Matthew was open, emotional, present. When he smiled at her, she saw everything they'd built together in the past 8 months. The fights and the healing, the vulnerability and the growth, the choice to keep choosing each other. She walked toward him without music, without fanfare. Just Desiree beside her until halfway, then Catherine taking over. The two women who'd saved them both in different ways, delivering Jasmine to the man who'd accidentally become her salvation. When she reached him, Matthew took both her hands, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," she whispered back. The officiant, a kind woman who specialized in second-chance weddings, smiled at them both. "We're gathered today to celebrate not just a marriage, but a transformation. Matthew and Jasmine have already done the hard work of becoming partners. Today, they're simply making it official in front of the people who love them." She nodded to Matthew. "I believe you've prepared your own vows?" Matthew nodded, still holding Jasmine's hands like lifelines. He took a breath, steadying himself for public vulnerability he'd once have found impossible. "Jasmine, 8 months ago, I asked you to marry me for all the wrong reasons. I needed a wife to secure an inheritance. You needed security to build a future. We agreed to trade a year of our lives for mutual benefit, with clear terms and a clean exit." He paused, thumb stroking her knuckles. "We were both so certain we didn't need love. Both so convinced we were better off alone." His voice cracked slightly. "And then you moved into my home, my life, my carefully controlled world, and you refused to stay in the box I'd built for you. You pushed my boundaries. You called me out. You saw my damage and didn't run. You made me want to be brave enough to try connection instead of control." Tears tracked down Jasmine's face as he continued. "You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That needing someone doesn't make me my father. That love doesn't have to be violent or destructive. It can be gentle, supportive, real." He smiled through his own tears. "You taught me how to be human again." He took a breath. "So today, I'm making you different promises than the ones in our contract. I promise to stay when things get hard instead of running. I promise to tell you the truth even when I'm scared. I promise to let you love me, even when I don't think I deserve it. And I promise to love you back, messily, imperfectly, but completely, for the rest of my life." He reached up to wipe her tears gently. No exit clauses. No expiration date. Just us. Forever. The garden was silent except for soft crying. Catherine dabbing her eyes, Desiree openly weeping, Rebecca recording everything with suspiciously wet eyes. The officiant turned to Jasmine. "Your vows." Jasmine took a moment to compose herself, looking at this man who'd accidentally saved her by trying to use her. Who'd given her security and accidentally given her love. Who'd been so certain he was a monster but was actually the most careful, considerate person she'd ever known. "Matthew, when you offered me $2 million to marry you, I said yes for all the wrong reasons. I needed money to escape my past. Needed security to build a future. Needed to know I'd survive." She squeezed his hands. "I'd spent my whole life alone because alone felt safer than depending on people who leave. I thought I had it figured out, survive independently, need nothing from anyone, keep my heart locked away where it couldn't get broken." She smiled through tears. "And then I moved into your penthouse, into your carefully controlled life, and discovered something terrifying. I wasn't alone anymore. You saw me, really saw me, in ways no one ever had. You made me feel worthy of care. You defended me, supported me, loved me even when I was prickly and defensive and determined to prove I didn't need anyone." Her voice strengthened. "You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. That partnership isn't prison. That love doesn't have to mean losing myself. It can mean finally becoming myself with someone who sees me completely." She reached up to touch his face. "So today, I'm making you different promises than the ones in our contract. I promise to stay even when you push me away. I promise to love you through your nightmares and your fears. I promise to be your partner, not your project. And I promise to choose you, every single day. Not because I have to, but because you make every day better just by being in it." She smiled. No price tag. No transaction. Just love. Forever. Matthew pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers, both of them crying openly now. The officiant gave them a moment. This wasn't a rushed courthouse ceremony where efficiency mattered. This was sacred, earned, real. Finally, she continued. "Matthew, do you take Jasmine to be your wife? To love, honor, and cherish in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, in joy and sorrow, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." His voice was rough with emotion. "God, I do." "Jasmine, do you take Matthew to be your husband? To love, honor, and cherish in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, in joy and sorrow, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." She smiled through tears. "Forever. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you again husband and wife." The officiant grinned. "Matthew, kiss your bride. For real this time." And he did. Not the chaste courthouse kiss. Not the desperate kiss after their fight. This was a promise kiss, deep and certain and witnessed, a declaration to 30 people and each other that this was real, this was chosen, this was forever. When they pulled apart, the garden erupted in applause and cheers. Catherine was openly crying. Desiree whistled. Rebecca was already posting photos. Matthew kept his arms around Jasmine, unwilling to let go, and whispered in her ear, "Stay with me tonight." The echo of those words, the ones he'd whispered 6 months ago when everything hung in the balance, the ones that had become their private joke, their secret reminder of the moment everything changed, made Jasmine laugh through her tears. "Every night," she whispered back, "for the rest of our lives." The reception was small, intimate, perfect. They'd rented out the Italian restaurant Matthew had pretended not to love, the one where his grandmother made the wedding soup he'd admitted to craving that first night of honesty. Dinner was loud, joyful, full of toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Desiree told embarrassing stories about teenage Jasmine. Catherine shared tales of young Matthew's misadventures. Rebecca gave a speech about watching two people fall in love while pretending they weren't. "I knew after the gala," Rebecca said, glass raised. "You two came back to the penthouse and fought in the living room about whether you were performing or being real. And I thought, oh, they're in love and terrified. This is going to be either beautiful or disastrous." She grinned. Glad it ended up beautiful. After dinner, they danced. Not the stiff performative dancing of their first gala, but real dancing. Matthew held Jasmine close while Sinatra played, and she felt his heartbeat steady under her palm. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That 8 months ago I was standing in my office at midnight, reading my grandfather's will, convinced I'd have to engineer a marriage to keep my company." He pulled back to meet her eyes. "And now I'm dancing with my wife at our real wedding, and I couldn't care less about the company. This is what matters." "You're what matters." "The company still matters," Jasmine corrected gently. "But it's not the only thing anymore." "No," he agreed. "It's not." They swayed together, and Jasmine thought about the journey that had brought them here. The courthouse and the contract. The careful distance and the forced proximity. The grandmother visit and the late-night conversations. The moment on the balcony when they'd chosen vulnerability over safety. The devastating fight and the harder choice to stay. All of it had led to this. Dancing in an Italian restaurant with the man she loved, surrounded by people who'd watched them become real. "Hey," Matthew said softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For pushing past my walls. For making me believe I was worth fighting for." He kissed her forehead. "For staying. Thank you for coming after me. For being brave enough to admit you were scared. For choosing me back." She smiled. "For letting me reorganize your bookshelves. I still hate the color coding." "I know. But you love me anyway." "I really do." He spun her gently, making her laugh. "Mrs. Kirk." "Mr. Kirk." She let him pull her close again. "Ready for forever? With you." "Absolutely." As the song ended, Catherine approached with champagne and a knowing smile. Time for the grandfather clause toast. They gathered everyone, all 30 guests, and Catherine raised her glass. "When my husband wrote that marriage clause into his will, he didn't do it to torture Matthew. He did it because he knew something Matthew hadn't learned yet. That life isn't worth living alone. That success means nothing without someone to share it with. That love, messy, complicated, terrifying love, is the only thing that actually matters." She looked at Matthew and Jasmine. "He wanted you to find what we had. And while your path was unconventional," laughter rippled through the guests, "you found it. You found each other. You found partnership and honesty and the courage to be vulnerable. That's what he wanted for you." She raised her glass higher. "To Matthew and Jasmine. May your real marriage be everything your fake one accidentally became. Surprising, challenging, and absolutely worth fighting for." "To Matthew and Jasmine." Everyone chorused. They drank, and Jasmine felt the weight of the past year settle into something beautiful. They'd started as strangers signing contracts. They'd become friends, then lovers, then partners. Now they were husband and wife. For real. Forever. Later that night, back in their apartment, their home, not his penthouse or her guest wing but theirs, Matthew carried her across the threshold because she joked about it and he'd taken her seriously. "You know we're already married," she laughed as he set her down in the living room. "Have been for 8 months. Doesn't count. That was the contract marriage. This is the real one." He pulled her close, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. "This is the one that matters." "They both mattered," Jasmine corrected. "The first one brought us together. This one keeps us together." "Fair point." He kissed her softly. "Want to know a secret?" "Always. I fell in love with you in the first week. Maybe even the first day." He tucked hair behind her ear. "You came into that conference room with your borrowed blazer and your proud spine, and you negotiated with me like an equal. You didn't fawn or flatter or try to manipulate. You just stated your terms clearly and asked if I could be honest. And I thought, she's going to ruin me. Was I right?" "Completely." He smiled. "You ruined me for anyone else. Ruined my carefully controlled life. Ruined my certainty that I was better off alone. Best ruination of my life." Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes again. "I fell in love with you when you defended me at the gala. When you turned to that awful woman and destroyed her with perfect politeness because she'd insulted my background. I realized then that you saw me, not as hired help or arm candy or transaction, but as someone worth protecting. "You're worth everything," Matthew said fiercely. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." "Good plan." She kissed him. "I've got a similar plan for you." They stood in their living room, books organized by color, photos from their journey on the walls, evidence of their combined lives everywhere, and Jasmine marveled at how far they'd come. From strangers to spouses to friends to lovers to partners. From contract to choice to commitment to forever. "Matthew," she said softly. Stay with me tonight." The callback to his desperate whisper 6 months ago made him laugh and pull her closer. "Every night, remember? For the rest of our lives. Promise. Promise." He kissed her deeply, certainly, with all the love they'd both been too scared to believe in. No exit clauses. No expiration date. Just us. Just us, she echoed. And in that moment, in their imperfect apartment with their complicated history and their hard-won happiness, Jasmine Kenneth Kirk and Matthew Kirk began the rest of their forever. Not because a contract said so, but because they'd chosen each other. Every day. In every way that mattered. 1 year later. Matthew found Jasmine in the nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow while humming off-key. "You hired painters for this," he said from the doorway. "I wanted to do it myself." She turned, paint streaked across her cheek, 7 months pregnant and absolutely glowing. "Our daughter should know her mother painted her room. Our daughter is going to know her mother is stubborn and refuses help even when she's supposed to be resting." But he crossed the room, taking the brush from her hand gently. "Let me finish. You don't know how to paint. I built a tech empire from nothing. I think I can handle a wall." He kissed her paint-streaked face. "Besides, we're partners. We do things together, remember?" "Fine." She settled into the rocking chair they'd bought last week, the first of many pieces of furniture for the new life they were building. "But you're doing it wrong already." Backseat painting. Excellent. But he was smiling and she was laughing, and this was what their contract had accidentally created. A life. A home. A family. Not perfect. Never perfect. But theirs. And that was more than enough.